Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out to this regular Board of Trustees for Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, sir?
Mayor Karspeck?
Here.
Trustee Heinman?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here.
Trustee Hardy?
Here.
Trustee Grace?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Here.
Trustee Sorcelli will be absent this evening.
All right, thank you. Let's move on now to citizen participation. This is for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. So I see some for water policy, and we'll have a chance there to talk about that. The rest of you pickleball. So we'll start with Catherine Scott. If you're in the audience tonight, if you could please come to the front and state your name and address, please. And if possible, keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Appreciate it.
Okay, you guys?
Yes, please.
Catherine Scott, 109 Southeast 2nd Street. And this is about pickleball. I wrote a letter that was in this week's paper in reaction to what I read in last week's paper. So I don't know if everybody's read it, maybe not, so I'll read it now. I am shocked, disappointed, and angry to learn that the Berkeley Board of Trustees voted unanimously to approve the design concepts for the town park redevelopment, minus the pickleball court shown on the western side of the property. I'll be the first to say that I agree with the existing pickleball courts are too close to the neighboring houses. It is an issue that I can understand that the neighbors find the noise and errant balls annoying. Though the pickleball courts are used often, I do want to point out that though they are not used sun up to sundown all day, every day, as one resident stated, they are used at different times during the day depending on the season. In the summer, they are used early when it is cool and late in the day until dark. This time of year, they tend to be used in the middle of the day, but not early or late. It is not reasonable to eliminate them from the design altogether. By the way, does the basketball court get to stay? The park proposal should be redesigned to accommodate these activities over near the schoolyards and away from the houses. I was very disappointed that the new rec center grounds at Wagoner did not include pickleball courts on the exterior. I cannot begin to understand this. As a resident, I am paying for the recreation center, which I must also pay to use if I decide to. Pickleball there is not free. Sometimes I get the impression that the town considers pickleball to be a low priority activity for retirees. It is actually the fastest growing sport in the country, I've heard, and people of all ages play it. At the Berthoud courts, we enjoy playing pickleball with people from teenagers on up. Lots of truly sociable, lots of folks in their 30s, 40s, and 50s play all the time, along with people in their 60s and 70s. It is truly sociable and a great community activity which provides residents a way to get to know one another. We have lots of folks that play regularly. To take the pickleball courts away would be very detrimental to many residents. We actually need more courts. There are so many people playing now. One often has to wait to play. It is hard to imagine that complaints from a few residents will cause scores of other residents to not have the opportunity to play pickleball in town here for free, just as they are able to do in neighboring towns. It seems that Berthoud is greedily allowing development after development to build here. The town does not have the infrastructure to support all this growth so fast. Please do not take the 4 pickleball courts away before there are a minimum of 4 other ones. We actually need more, provided the town for the use of residents. Things have a way of never coming back once they disappear. Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate it. Next is Dave Changnon. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Just like Catherine did, if you'd like to remove your mask, it's actually better so we can
Is
hear
it better?
your mic. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
My name's Dave Shagman. I live at 307 Rhubarb Drive with my wife Susie, and we just moved here recently. So, like the previous individual, we asked that the Berthoud Board of Trustees reconsider its decision to remove the pickleball courts from the town park redevelopment plans. Although new to Berthoud, we have enjoyed playing pickleball at the town park and other nearby venues. The sport has given us the opportunity to meet other members of the community, and it's an economical way to stay fit and enjoy the outdoors. We appreciate the recently resurfaced courts in the town park, along with the nicely installed ADA compliant concrete sidewalks leading to the courts as they now exist. We understand the noise concerns raised by one of our community members. However, we ask that the board consider other potential options so that we can continue to play outdoor pickleball in Berthoud. These options include moving the proposed 4 pickleball courts to a more central location within the redeveloped town park, further away from the homeowners. Limit the time for outdoor pickleball play to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The Loveland Park District has done the same thing, has made a similar decision with the new pickleball courts developed in the southwest corner of Osborne Park in Loveland. Or convert the tennis courts in the Fickle Park to dedicated pickleball courts as another option. We believe that pickleball will continue to attract more interest, and not just retirees like ourselves, and thus should be included into any public park redevelopment or development efforts by this community. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in America and attracts participants from all across our community. These outdoor courts give many individuals an inexpensive opportunity to exercise, meet new community members, and appreciate how our tax dollars are spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next is Herga.
Mayor Karspeck and trustees, I'm representing a lot of members from the Berthoud Pickleball Club and my wife, and I would like to be able to exceed the 3 minutes if you give me permission.
I cannot. I apologize. If we can just keep it
As
as
close. I do have 10 copies of what my 8 to 10 minutes would be.
Okay.
So,
You can give it to the clerk and we can pass it out for the town administrator.
Thank you.
Herb Herget, 568 Canyon Land Street, Berthoud, Colorado. We've lived there about 5.5 years, since September of 2016. I participated in the introduction of pickleball for Berthoud at Pickle Park with Bethany Taraka in 2017, and we had, the temporary tape lines and the temporary nets that they put up, and we tried to encourage her and to have the rec department convert Pickle Park over to 4 pickleball courts, and the town listened, but they decided to use Town Park instead of Pickle, which was close to the houses, and so now we have this situation of noise close to residents. I would encourage you to reconsider Pickle Park
So why don't we try
where you put
disconnecting the audio?
4 to 6
Connecting
pickleball
to
courts.
Zoom.
Pickleball court is the fastest growing sport, of course, and you've heard that. It's contagious. Once you start playing and learn the game, it is a great physical activity. It's great for social fellowship, for community continuity,
Something else.
especially for those age 50 and up. We play with many families, young kids and stuff over there, and teach them the game. But I encourage the town trustees to come to Town Park. Before that is going, we'll be playing all this year, and participate, witness, and get to know your pickleball community. The sport has strong followings in both Loveland and Longmont, the neighboring communities. In 2021, Charlie Tarnitzer started Berthoud Pickleball Club. It has 55 plus members today. 33 are Berthoud residents. I believe in 2022, we will grow to 80 to 100 members, with 70% being Berthoud residents. With the 4 courts at Town Park, the playing public was patient, maybe not happy when we heard you weren't going to build the courts at the rec center, but we had the existing town courts, and we figured that they would never go away until you built something else somewhere else, and that's where we feel today you need to not take those away from us. I have engaged with Jeremy Olinger and Amanda Gustafson, and it is considered to use Fickle Park with temporary nets and tape again, and maybe over at Pioneer Park on the hockey courts, and to me that's unacceptable. We need to have permanent netted pickleball courts for this community of growing pickleball players in your town. The town of Berthoud needs to have 4 to 6 designated courts with net and fencing to play in. We hear comments like the town is working with the developing neighborhoods to put in pickleball courts. That is well and good to help reduce the need for the town to add more courts. Our concern is that they will be restricted courts by the HOA or Metro District. Example is Prairie Star is a private court. You have to be a resident or a guest of a resident in order to play there. I live in Heritage Ridge. To use that pool, you need to be a resident or guest of the resident to use that pool. So these developing communities, we encourage them to put it there, but that doesn't resolve the need for the general public that lives elsewhere in this community.
Is that a different output?
You need to know that many pickleball players enjoy playing outdoors for the fresh air. If above 40 degrees and sunny, we'll be playing, especially with COVID concerns of playing indoors. Maybe in the future, once indoor COVID concerns are better and the rec center has established their active, renew, and silver sneaker programs, which are not active yet, we will actively be using the rec center when it's below 40 degrees.
Mr. Herda, I gotta, sorry, butchered your last name there, but I gotta cut you off here, we're over time.
I just got one last statement, can I say
To
it?
make a column and
We
have
have
it
we got your paper here.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just ask that you do not remove those courts until you have something funded and convenient build plan in place.
Thank you. Folks, stick around, we'll have the, after this is all done, we'll have our town administrator gonna do an update here. Next would be Gary Gears.
Hi. Hello. Gary Gears, 109 Southeast 2nd Street here in Bergen. And what I have here, I'll be brief, what I have here is a screenshot of, it's called Playtime Scheduler, and it's for, Greeley, Loveland, Fort Collins, Longmont, all sorts of towns to be able to sign up for pickleball games. And you can sign yourself up, see who else will be there, at what time, what day. And this is just a snapshot of this past Sunday and Monday, a couple days ago. And there were 2 games set up. An individual can start a game, and then people will be emailed that there's a new game that has a new session started. And then anyone can go and sign themselves up just by clicking their name, because it's a free membership. Anyway, so we've got 1 game started at noon. There were 10 people. Another game started at 1 with 19 people. That, if you add it up, that's, what is that, 29 people. And there are 4 courts that support 12 people. So a lot of people standing around. And then the day following, we had 16 people. So that was, again, 4 more than the 4 courts we had there. So anyway, this is just to illustrate just how many people come and play on a given day. And this was just this past weekend. So, and that is it.
Thank you very much. Pam Wolf.
Good evening. Pam Wolf. I live at 734 14th Street. And I'm basically repeating what has been already said, that pickleball is a really important sport to us. It's, for me, it's the way I basically get my exercise. Play almost every day and have been for several years. And when I saw that Bertha finally had pickleball courts, I was so happy. And then after hearing the trustees vote to ban the, get rid of the courts, it was very depressing. And it is. I mean, this is a way that we do socialize. I get to know people in my community rather than going outside. You don't have to go to Loveland or Longmont to play. It's nice to have it in the community that we live in. So I just would like to have you reconsider getting rid of the court. And I understand if I lived by a court, I wouldn't particularly like that either, but that we do need courts available before we get rid of the ones that are already here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Jan Babcock?
line.
I live at 605 Lucia Court in Berthick, Colorado, which is a rural area. I come into town all the time. I've lived here for 38 years. It's a long time. And I just really enjoy playing pickleball. And I just reiterate what everyone else was saying, how it was really good to put courts out for the general public to play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, looks like the other two speakers are on the water policy discussion, and that'll be our first on the regular agenda. So to discuss this pickleball thing real quick, Administrator Kirk, we had some other locations, but it does sound like some of them are private. Like we did list Prairie Star, right?
Prairie Star we haven't discussed. Pioneer Park will have pickleball courts, and those will be public. They'll be part of the town park. We do have the option to construct some pickleball courts at Wagner. As you know, we have designated kind of the last square of undeveloped dirt there for a library. I don't know that that library is going to happen in short order, and so that may be worth considering constructing new pickleball courts there, which we as staff think is a good idea if the library is not going to be located there. We also have plans to put pickleball courts at Richardson as we build that facility. There are pickleball courts included in the Berthoud 160 park, which, as you know, will be dedicated to the town when it's complete, so that'll be a public facility. This is a little bit like the pool, and I think we absolutely understand there's a very dedicated group of pickleball players, and it's expanding every day. We know that's an amenity that's needed in town. I think we all discussed that we don't think it makes sense at Town Park. I think there's even been some support of that tonight. And I think it may be a timing issue. We may go one summer season without pickleball courts. I think by the time we get it lined up, it's possible that they'll be in place, but it's not that different than the pool. I think if you'll recall, Town Park Pool shut down and did not operate last year. Because it's not going to end up in Town Park in the future. That facility is a little different because it was aged to the point where it was no longer functional. But we had to go a summer without a pool. Now we've got a new pool at the rec center, and we'll have another outdoor aquatics facility here in the next few years.
It's not streaming.
So I think the timing is up to the board. Those pickleball courts aren't going to get shut down until such time as we're redeveloping the park, and that timing will be decided by the board.
Okay. Mr. Chesney, you have everything?
Yeah, just really quick. This is a time for great discussion, but this board has a policy of doing brief responses to citizen comments. So we are well aware of the demand for pickleball, and you guys are one of the most active citizens groups we have, and we really appreciate the input. You know, the reason they were at Town Park is just because there was an old tennis court there and it got transitioned. So it wasn't by good planning, it was by just historical accident. And I think everybody, after considering, when we're redesigning and spending a lot of money to master plan a new park, we need to get it right and not repeat mistakes. So I think it all is in the timing. I would support exploring Wagner. I think from what I've heard, it's pretty unlikely the library is going to happen anytime soon. And I think there might be other options for the library, and Wagner would be a perfect place to have those. And when we designed Wagner, there was not a huge demand for pickleball, right? That design was 3 or 4 years ago, and the demand for pickleball has greatly accelerated with some of the new residents. Anyway, so Pioneer Park, from what we've heard from staff, the park is going to get expanded hopefully this summer. So I think there's an opportunity to make the timing work out on that, or if we free up the land at Wagner, we can build pickleball there this summer. Because the fortunate thing in Berthoud's park planning at the moment is that we have a tremendous dedicated revenue source that voters passed in 2018, and it's bringing in way more money than ever forecast. So the good news is if we can find a location, we have the resources to build pickleball. So, and correct me, but HOA Metro District facilities are open to the public.
That's correct.
It's not, you don't have to be a resident.
So why can't they?
So by law, Metro District facilities have to be open to the public. They can be open to the public at a fee, but you cannot exclude the public, as I understand it.
I mean, that's what we've read too. I think there might need to be some education with the developer, Scott, make sure that that's what they're getting told.
Sure.
Yeah, with the HOA, not
The connect
HOA,
on
right.
YouTube.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, it's not supposed to be contingent upon knowing someone in that metro district, because
No,
we've
YouTube
approved
page.
quite a few metro districts, and I would be very upset to know that they can exclude people just because they don't happen to know someone who lives there.
They can charge a fee
They
for
can
the
charge
use of
a
those
fee.
facilities. You know, pool is a good example. The Heritage Ridge Pool, they cannot tell you cannot participate at all, but they can charge you an out-of-district fee. Because the residents of that district are paying a higher mill levy in order to use those facilities.
Well, regardless, folks, I think your attendance tonight in this amount too says a lot about the pickleball community. And it does sound like we do have some options here going forward. And is there anything else, trustees, would like to Mayor Pro Tem, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'd just like to make one comment in that I very much appreciate your community, the pickleball community, because you did not just come here to complain, you offered solutions. And I really commend you for that. So many people come and complain and just would expect us to fix everything, but you guys actually offered solutions, so thank you. And, you know, I think that the town administrator can find some compromises for you guys.
Yeah, what's the possibility, likelihood of having something built at Wagner like this summer, like Jeff said?
I think that's up to the board. I mean, we can financially do it. Again, the board had committed some property at the rec center or at Wagner Farm Park for the construction of the library. The library's ballot measure failed, as you know, recently, and I don't think they intend to pursue that ballot measure again for a few years. They also recognize, and they've told me directly, that we may not hold that property for the library district, and so if the board wanted to repurpose that land and ask us to prioritize the construction of pickleball courts there, I think that's something we could do.
So would that be done
in
in
short
court or in a different meeting as an agenda item?
It would not be done tonight, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, but that's why I'm asking, what's the next step after we get an RFP put out for bid? That's what you're going to do, I'm sure that would be the step, right?
It would be a very quick process for us to get pickleball courts constructed.
Yeah, the piggyback on that, I've been getting people asking me about frisbee golf. When are we getting
Sure,
that?
I mean, we get requests for all kinds of
Yeah.
recreational amenities. Frisbee golf is a very
Frisbee
dedicated
golf
user
at
group
Wagner
that
Farm Park would be awesome, I said.
we hear about that regularly as well.
Trustee Gray, did you have anything? Trustee Stevens?
Just a quick question. Did I understand correctly that Pickle Park is slotted to go ahead and transform those into pickleball courts?
No.
And why wouldn't we do that?
That's our only tennis court. The tennis courts at the high school are now owned and operated by the town, so we don't have any control over those. That is the only tennis court the town currently owns.
It also is likely to have the same problem. It's right across the street from.
Too much noise?
Wagner is a perfect
Everybody used to sell
location.
Bravo.
The location where we could construct pickleball courts at Wagner is in the center of the park and well away from any.
And lots of parking.
Lots of parking, lots of good reasons to build it there.
How many courts could we fit in there?
A lot.
A lot. Okay.
More than 6.
More than we could use, I think, yeah. We have enough room there to build lots and lots of pickleball courts.
And if we did build those temporarily, and then the Berthoud Library came back to us and said, hey, we did get funding, would we say no?
They
no,
My
wouldn't-
suggestion
they wouldn't
would be-
temporary.
Yeah, my suggestion would be if we choose to construct pickleball courts or anything else in that location where we have the library, that the library would have to find a new site.
And this would be city-owned and no fee, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think the time of use type thing makes sense too. Okay, thank you folks, you're on our mind, appreciate it.
So the good news is we have some of the only indoor pickleball in the entire northern Colorado region, so you guys can use that for the winter.
All right, we can move on now to the consent agenda. That regards committee meetings, board update, broadband feasibility study, bike park project RFP, and BAT's OA contract. Trustees, like anything to move to the consent agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to move the bike park project.
All right, bike park project.
You guys stick around for 2 minutes, you can hear about a really exciting new bike park that's going to be built this summer.
Trustees, like anything else to move? All right, is there a motion to approve minus the bike project RFP?
So moved.
Second, or is there a second? All right, we have a motion that's been seconded. Clerk, do a roll call vote.
Trustee Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Heinman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Yes,
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck?
Yes. All right, so item removed from the consent agenda should be considered immediately after, so we'll go right into the bike park. Trustee Hyman?
Yeah, so I removed this just so it could be highlighted. The consent agenda, there's not a lot of focus on individual items. So anyway, it's an incredibly exciting project. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Valmont Bike Park in Boulder. This is going to be a mini version of that. It's the first part of Richardson Park that we're going to be able to develop, and it will be a regional amenity. There isn't anything like this anywhere that I know of in any in Loveland or Longmont. So it'll be a great, really incredible new amenity, and we're going to be able to pay cash for it. It's in the budget for this year, and I thought Administrator Kirk just give us a 3-minute description of what's in store for the bike park. I thought that would be good for the public.
I'd be happy to. Michelle, Mayor, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Michelle, could you pull up the packet on the screen that we could look at, just to kind of scroll through some of that staff report? There's some good photos in there. You may recall, back in the 2018 master plan, when we look at Richardson Park, Town Park, Needle, and Wagner, phase 1 of Richardson was going to be a bike park there on the west side of the facility. On the west side of the park between Loveland Lake and Highway 287, being accessed from Meadowlark. Meadowlark is that, intersection where like Quick Corner is, right? And Highway 56, or Mountain Avenue. We hired American Ramp Company to help us with the design of that park. We did surveys, port committee review, and I think what we've come up with is really, really awesome. A bike skills park with areas for beginning riders to start to learn how to maneuver their bikes, ride on a small pump track, skills park area, dirt jump lines with kind of beginner, intermediate, and expert level type runs, slope style course, which is kind of specific to mountain biking primarily, but with a variety of obstacles and wooden features and things like that, and then some cross-country trails and skill development areas. So really being able to maximize the use of that site. There's an asphalt pump track planned. That is the most expensive part of the park, so we want to look at what the bids come in at. That'll be a separate bid item. We may recommend postponing construction of. Our construction estimate was that asphalt pump track, which is designed to be able to accommodate like Red Bull pump track races. So I mean, it's world class in its design, but it's about the same price as the rest of the park combined. I think we can afford it, and depending on what the bids come in at, we may recommend to you that we make a budget adjustment and build that. Having an amenity of that kind of quality and scope would be pretty significant for the town. So here on the screen, you see Loveland Lake. There on the west side, the master plan suggested this kind of parks, bike park and trails area.
The Samsung.
There's some odd fading here going on, sorry. We are having some, Mayor Karspek, we are having some strange AV issues, and we're aware of some problems with the audio going out over our internet broadcast. It's apparently, the audio is very choppy for some reason. We're not sure why, so just so you're aware, we're trying to get that
Have we
fixed.
got glitches with the new system? It happens?
We do. It worked flawlessly last meeting, as far as I know, but we're having some challenges this time, so appreciate your patience with that. But again, master plan showed bike park on the west side of the reservoir. And Michelle, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down for me, we'll just kind of skim over the. We got 202 responses to our survey that went out, so it was kind of exciting. A lot of interest from the local mountain bike and trail groups in northern Colorado. If you'll just continue to scroll down a little bit farther, we're going to go, let's just go down to the maps. This was all in your packet, but happy to cover any of that you're interested in. Here we go. This is kind of the overall layout. So again, accessing from the south at Meadowlark, we'll build a soft surface parking area and some restrooms at the southern end of the park. The bicycle playground is really intended for younger or beginning riders to develop their skills. The asphalt pump track, again, a variety of jump lines ranging from beginner, intermediate, all the way up to advanced or expert. And then skills trails and cross-country trails. This was kind of our draft that went out for review, and Michelle, if you'll scroll down, we have a little bit more refined version if you'll keep going. We did modify the parking arrangement, push it farther away from the homes, and to change the layout of parking spaces so that, you know, if there were people there at dawn or dusk, that wouldn't have headlights shining in people's backyards and some of those kinds of issues. So we heard some of that feedback during the port committee and made some adjustments there. And this is kind of the final layout that's been put together. Eventually, as Richardson Park develops, you'll also be able to access this from the north, coming through the rest of Richardson Park from Bertha Parkway. And I think we'll end up having a little bit more trail development and some additional parking areas up on the north end as well.
Fantastic.
So happy to answer any other questions you might have, but we're really excited about it and hope to have this constructed by midsummer if everything goes well.
Trustee Hardy?
It's not really related to bicycling, even though I'm ready to go up there and ride some of these trails. But will that park have access to the lake for fishing?
No.
Fenced off, or how would it be separated?
It will not be fenced off. We'll have signs posted. The surface rights to Loveland Reservoir are leased to I think it's the Mead Sportsman's Club. As you know, Loveland Reservoir is owned by the Loveland Lake and Ditch Company, not by the town, although we are the majority shareholder. But we don't have access to the surface rights to that lake. So
I was just wondering if it's going to, because that lake will get pretty low on that side, and I could just see some people riding on the dirt down there when the lake's lower and things like that. So I was just wondering what kind of separation or indication that it's private property needs to have.
we'll have signs up, but that's our only intent at this point.
All right, any other questions? That's great.
Thank you.
Trustees, is there a motion to approve the bike park RFP?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who's that? Trustee Grace, all right. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Heinman,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. All right, we can move on now to the regular agenda, and that'll be cash in lieu of water, or fees in lieu of water dedication increase. This is a public hearing, so this is a quasi-judicial event, and we'll have our town administrator, Chris Kirk, introduce this.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Karsbeck. As you know, our current ordinance allows for the purchase of water certificates through our cash in lieu program. As new homes and businesses are built, we have to go out and acquire additional water in the future to continue to support that growth and development. We do that through a cash in lieu program. As a developer or builder, you have the option under our ordinance to bring with you and dedicate water to the town in water rights that are acceptable to the town. And in doing so, you get credit for a certain number of SFEs or single-family equivalents that can be used in your building process. Alternatively, if you don't dedicate water, you can purchase, again, water through our cash in lieu program. As you know, back in 2018, we increased the price of that cash in lieu per SFE to $16,500 per single-family equivalent. It's basically a single-family house on an average-sized lot up to 12,500 square feet. Houses built on larger lots pay 1.25 SFEs, and houses on smaller than 3,500 square foot lots pay 0.75 SFEs. Commercial development, open spaces, those are done based on water calculations, trying to understand the future expected use and how much water we'll need to acquire in order to support that development. Tonight, we're suggesting to you, after our water study session back in December, we're suggesting to you that the price for a cash in lieu water purchase should be $25,000 in SFE today and no longer $65,000. That's primarily driven by a change in the water markets. As we go out and acquire new water shares, either ditch shares that have to be changed in water court, or CBT water, or wind gap, a variety of sources that make up our water portfolio. We believe that that a reasonable average is somewhere in that 25,000 per SFE range. That's much less than CBT, but it's more than some of the other sources that we're purchasing. That $25,000 in SFE is also what we think it will take to develop a new water source that we're working on, a very large water deal for future development. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but it's in process. So I think, we've had a lot of conversations about larger water policy issues, which I think we still need to have. As we discussed back in December, we felt like the first step is getting our per SFE price adjusted to something we feel like is appropriate based on the market, and then continue in parallel with reviewing our overall water policy and how we handle raw water dedication and or caching. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. Otherwise, our recommendation is, excuse me, that you would adopt ordinance 1300, which would increase the price of cash and lieu payments for water dedication to $25,000 in SFE.
Good. Questions for staff? Very.
When was this, under the presumption that this passed, when would this take effect? Immediately, or?
If you pass this tonight, it is not an emergency ordinance. It would not go into effect immediately. It would be 30 days from publication.
I know different water types in surrounding municipalities, but for the ones that do cash and lieu in the area, what prices go for?
I don't know the exact prices off the top of my head. This is relatively in line with Little Thompson and their urban water tap. They have a larger water tap price that's much more expensive than this. It's intended for larger lot development, but their urban tap, I believe, is 23 something. So it's pretty well in line with that. And I think it's important to remember, we've mentioned this before, but in addition to the per SFE cost that gets paid, typically a building permit. So when somebody comes in to pull a building permit for a house, in addition to all the permit and plan review fees, in addition to their tap fees and parks fees and everything else that gets charged, they pay cash and lieu water dedication. But in addition to that, the developer of a subdivision is required to pay for the water dedication for their open space. So the more open space the development has, excuse me, the higher that water cost is, as you can imagine. And so what often ends up happening is when you average out the cost, the developer paid for all their open space, and it gets paid for each individual house. It's much more than, like currently it's $16,500 per SFE. The actual amount that's paid per house in that subdivision is somewhere in the $23,000, $24,000 range, depending on the amount of open space and the type of open space that's constructed. So, and the same would be true under this ordinance. We're not changing that part of the policy. We're not suggesting tonight if we change that part of the policy. That might be something we want to discuss and consider moving forward. I think there's arguments in favor of that policy and arguments against it that both make sense. But it's something to consider in the total context of what's being charged per house.
Other questions?
Administrator, just went over what I was hoping would mention.
All right, great. At this time, I'll open it up to the public, and this will be the same format, 3 minutes or less. Please state your name and address. And we'll start off with Jim Righeimer. Welcome back.
Yes, it's been a week. I think I did less than 3 minutes, but Alex came with me also, so I used to find out. Basically, as far as the price and all that, it's your fiduciary responsibility, it's your water price of property, so I'm not going to speak about the price of all. What I've been trying to do, and I've talked to, Chris and I've talked to over the years, some of the board members here, we've talked to about how you use your water policy to get what you want with regards to open space. Now, we live here in Heritage. 30+% open space when you're allowed to require. And I'm not going to talk about this project because that just is not right. What happens when you charge for water for open space, people just have all the backyards come together, they lots, they do whatever it takes so that there's no open space. So what I'm saying is that what you should look at is right now, it's at 12,000, section 11, 12,000 cut off. The last 12,000, that's one that's healthy. When we do open space, it's two SFDs per acre. It's $50,000 for the water per acre of open space. Every developer is going to look and say, I don't want to open space. So the first thing they do is they add more houses. They come in with more consent. They do whatever they can because the policy is saying, if I just leave it open, it's $50,000 an acre based on the price if you guys can afford it. What I'm just saying is there's a way we can change policy and not cost the city anything in regards to here's what I'm talking about. If you're allowed 12,000 square feet, and let's say our average lot is about 7,000, 8,000. There's an additional 5,000 square feet. Now, where's that at? In our neighborhoods, we always have a green belt. So all we would do to save money, if we wanted to, was just go ahead and make the backyards deeper, put the fences together, get a green belt, we don't pay a penny more. And we have large lots, a lot of builders pay us more for that. We've always wanted to have communities with more open space. Quite frankly, I've been trying to get this conversation done sooner before we came with our project before because we kind of bet on the fact that there would be a policy that would say, would incentivize developers to do it. So, if you give some sort of credit, some formula, and staff have to come up with and say, you have all these backyards you didn't extend. And remember, that's all it's native. Okay? So meaning, once you scarf up the land and don't touch it, you've got to seed it. Okay? If you don't touch it, you don't have to seed it. But pretty much, we have to seed it, sprinkler system in. But within 2 years, the water's turned off. So we're behind water, $50,000 an acre, which after 2 years, you really don't use anymore. It really kind of goes into the excess, whatever the dollars that you have. So you could change the policy to say, you get, you require 10%, fine to pay for 10%. But above the 10%, give a credit for backyards that weren't used or some kind of formula, which then developers will say, because I get laughed at. Why, you're an idiot, Jim. Why do you put these green belts in that cost you a fortune? Well, it's a better neighborhood. Well, that's stupid. I don't want it to be stupid anymore. I'd like it to be the policy makes sense for it to do. And the other thing that also helps you with is they could use that to say, hey, we'd like a little more turf. And so, but if I have 3 acre feet for every acre, I mean, I can't figure out what that one is. It gets up to the millions of dollars. Because that's all I'm doing now. Yeah, right now. Listen, all I'm saying is, what I'd like to recommend is that you direct staff to come back with a policy soon, and then people can discuss and talk about to get what you want, which was the open space. At least don't penalize the builder for doing it. At least make it so it's like, hey, you have used open space, at least don't find water, especially for native, which after 2 years you're not sprinkling anyway. So that's it. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, over August's time. Anyone else in the room that did not have a chance to sign up for speak to the water session? Give anyone online?
I'm gonna check again right at the moment. Your honor, there is not. And we were able to get the audio fixed so they can now hear and see us.
All right, well, let's give it another announcement here. If there's anyone online that would like to speak to this agenda item, message. Christian Sonora.
There is none here.
At this time, I'll close the public comment on the hearing the exec board for deliberation. I guess we don't have, is there any additional questions?
I agree with Mr. Hunter. I think that our policy had the unintended changing nature of open space that's being constructed and changing the amount of open space that gets constructed. It is expensive to pay for water for that open space, and I think it's reasonable that if your average lot size is 7,500 square feet, but one SFB, in theory, covers up to 12,000 square feet, you're kind of eating around on the table by putting in open space that you have to pay for again. I think there are ways that we can come up with a reasonable, average lot size calculation and adjust the cash and price accordingly for the open space areas. It won't affect lot themselves, right? But I think there are times where we could be charging more than necessary to cover the amount of open space. And we don't want to disincentivize or penalize the construction of open space. It's so expensive to pay for water to do so. So I think the goal of maximizing the amount of open space that's included in the neighborhoods, there's some good sense to what Mr. Timer was talking about.
Seems like a good example for an ATM or something, another way to do it, at least the water use.
Absolutely, that's a good suggestion. And I think those are the kinds of policies that we need to work on as a board.
I agree with what was said, but I'm curious, my terminology correct. What if we increased the initial, excuse me?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. The initial and then the open space requirement is less, and then maybe it is a rebate or something after 2 years, to really incentivize the open space. That's what we want. For the tree capital.
I think that's a good suggestion too. My suggestion is that we'll bring back, if it sounds like this is something you want to consider in the context of your water policy conversation, yes, we have some other things we're discussing at staff level, we intend to bring back to you anyway, to talk about how we handle education and cash and loan, the timing of all those things. But we can bring back to suggest the options for you to consider for dealing with open space.
I love that.
And sorry, I failed to mention, Pete Johnson from Ranch and Ranch, our water attorney, is also on the line. If you have any more questions, please.
Thank you, Attorney Johnson. Trustee Grace?
Definitely want to incentivize or penalize for min-maxing property lines and technicalities. I guess just so I can kind of understand, does any of this also include any kind of pump systems that Metro District would have for pump rooms, or is this all treated, came from treatment centers, clean water?
So if you have the ability and you construct a pump system, it lowers the total amount you pay for cash. So there is an adjustment when there's pump system available.
So that is factored in already with this.
In our ordinance, there's language about how that works when you have a non-pump system.
Is there a chance, I know we keep circling past this, all these different discussions about water policies, water plants, and if they install pump systems, at least, keep grounds that are not property fed. It's incentivized by both us and the developer. But is that something that's been taking traction, or? I want to make sure we do this because it makes sense when you're talking about it. It does not make sense to treat all this water and throw it right back in the ground. So is there a way we can incentivize them to use a non-pump system, or is that kind of?
It's not quite as simple and straightforward as that. You have to have the water rights available to construct and deliver on hot water, and they have to be suitable for being used in those locations. But in all instances where we can, we want to see the development of non-pot systems, and that's something else we're working on internally. In fact, Ken Matthews, who's here today, you guys met a couple weeks ago, our utility director, is trying to talk today about at least the high level about how you're forming a non-pot util in a different way than you do now. Currently, we deliver non-pot resources to HOAs, we deliver them to their customers. For yards, Gateway is an example of that. And that's how Farmstead is set up, and how Aaron Lake's set up, that has a non-pot system. So we do have a lot of non-pot systems in town. Not controlling how those get developed, the timing of when those water rights get used, how they get transmitted to customers. It's a conversation we're going to have moving forward, for sure. But I think it's in its early stages today.
Okay, because that's definitely one I want to have brought forward as a viable option, not just hypothetically, this is a great idea, but an actual actionable idea. But
We agree that we don't need treated water on outdoor irrigation is a wasted treated water resource. If we can replace it with a suitable non-coastal resource.
yeah, I like where the price increase for the action movement, but at the same time, I want to also make sure we're working with developers, we're not letting the carrots dictate to
Trustee Hardy?
Yeah, the first thing I thought about when I started talking about this was the colors. So we can definitely review, look at how we can allocate, because it sounds like paying more for a lot, so it's 75 cents for a lot, and paying 12.
Yeah, I mean, one SFB, as you know, is a significant amount of water at any house is used outside. And so our SFB numbers change based on the size of the lot. There's a very large range that covers one SFB. So we have small lot development, three-quarters of an SFB. We have a large lot development that's 1.25 SFBs in terms of calculating the cost of cash related water education. But the one SFB is a big range in terms of lot size. So if you're building 5,000 square foot lots, you're leaving a lot of that land on the table that is in theory covered by that SFB. These are not hard and fast explicit rules. They're based on what we may have the average lot uses, but in terms of how much acre feet of water the average lot size uses. And we built in some buffer to make sure that you got high users, you got low users, and I got average users.
Standard lot and oversized lot, right?
Yep. Well, we have small lots. We have small lot, standard lot, oversized lot.
So would there be a need to maybe add another lot size in there?
There could be, where we could look at it from an average lot size throughout the development and find some ways to make some equitable adjustments. To not to encourage the developer to include an ag.
It's going overcomplicated, but also want to improve the trading, generally 50% of their FFP.
Yep.
You don't build two lots and pay one.
Yeah, definitely incentivize our
open space.
even though I don't really like the green belt stuff.
So you like
That's just my personal
Trustee Hyman?
Yeah, so I think Mr. Righeimer's comments are very valid. Heard that it's unique and that we charge the developer for open space irrigation, which I think is a really valid concept. The homeowners shouldn't necessarily be paying that as part of their building permit. But I think that, charging the fee on a minimum of 10%, as kind of like the base level makes sense, but figuring out how to taper that or figuring out how to revise that for over, doing more than required open space is really valid and really good idea, especially since we do try and promote water-wise landscaping, which is native grasses, we want active play spaces and parks, but we don't want to be spending a lot of irrigation on turf medians and so anyway, finding a way to lower that fee for the initial startup irrigation is necessary to establish the vegetation. Makes a lot of sense, and I would really support that. Just so the public, so the reason there wasn't a lot of discussion on this tonight is because this has been an ongoing discussion for like the last 3 years among the board. And our fees have not changed in 2 years. Well, price of water has, I don't know, close to doubled. So it's definitely time to raise our rates. It's a really precious resource for the best water rates and the best water portfolio in all of Colorado. We need to stay ahead of that, preserve that. Do not want to
want to see what happened in that planning. There's been some recent articles about, well, water district, severance, and other having to put more moratorium on building because they don't have the ability to deliver treated water. So, anyway, the other thing not is plant capacity. We have to build our plant for peak use. And so if you're spending millions of dollars to increase your capacity to treat your plant just so people water their yard on the summer, that's not only wasteful water, but that's wasteful capital investment. So anyway, and I really like the green belts. That was a neat concept of Darren Ridge because the grade alleys, we have some plantless alleys, but having those wildlife corridors and separation backyards and fields of heritage groups. So anyway, I would absolutely support staff back this policy revisions to fix the problem that Mr. Ringheimer is bringing to our attention.
I appreciate Mr. Ringheimer bringing this to our attention again. It is important, and we don't want to disincentivize open space, so it's really a valid point. I do support moving forward with trying to find some sort of compromise to encourage the open spaces, especially with native grasses. And yeah, for the first couple of years, it is going to take extra water, but once they're established, they are going to use less water, so it makes sense to give some sort of break for that. I would like to still keep the non-pot systems kind of more incentivized. Over using treated water. So yeah, I support what everyone here said, but just like to emphasize the non-pot aspect.
Yep, I have a little to say about that. Only with the point. It's a great point that you had. Trustee Hyman, there's been a lot of conversation. I believe this, in my opinion, still feels a little low. You want a little longer, but total trust staff that this is an appropriate amount.
Mr. Marshall, if I may, I did say earlier, Thompson rate was, I thought it was 23, it was 28 last year, not 23. And I double checked just now, it changed on January 1st this year to 35. So Little Thompson is significantly higher than
but nonetheless, this is an improvement to have a higher number, and I think it's just the ability to put that to use as fast as we can with purchase water and not hold on to that money. So I guess the question is to approve this, or just kind of you wanted staff to make some revisions before?
No, I need to approve this tonight, or I direct staff back revisions to the open space revisions.
All right, your motion?
I'll move. I move to approve ordinance 1300, an ordinance amending ordinance 1272, an ordinance of the town of Berthoud concerning water right dedication requirements and adopting water right dedication requirements.
Second.
All right. Trustee Grace, very serious.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Hyman, Trustee Stevens, Trustee Hardy, Mayor Carlsbad.
Yes. All right. Thank you for coming out for that.
Thank you very much.
Unanimous. Let's do a 5-minute break. Thank you. We'll call the meeting back to order. Next, we'll get on to the second amended and restated service plan for the Turian Metropolitan District. This is a public hearing. This will be introduced by Deborah Early. Hi, Deborah.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Board of Trustees. My name is Deborah Early. I'm with the law firm of Eisnagel Seaver Pogue, located at 4725 South Monaco Street in Denver, 80237. It's located in the Denver Tech Center. I am general counsel to the Turian Metropolitan Districts number 1 through 6. And we've also been working with the developer Front Range Investment Holdings to give to you tonight for your consideration and approval a second amended and consolidated service plan for Turian Metropolitan Districts number 1 through 6. And to organize Turian Metropolitan Districts numbers 7 through 21. And we have a presentation to go through tonight. After we go through it, we'll obviously take any questions you may have. Tonight, I have brought with me Bob Eck, who is the district president, and he's also working with the developer and developing the project and can probably answer more detailed questions about the project and public improvements. DA Davidson was our financial advisor who prepared Exhibit E, which is the financial plan, as well as worked on a pro forma that allocated out the public costs in Exhibit D. Kyle Thomas from DA Davidson is here with us tonight, so he would be able to answer any type of financial related questions. And finally, from Pinnacle Consulting Group, I have Peggy Dowswell and Chad Walker. They represent district management and accounting for Turian Metropolitan Districts number 1 through 6, so they can also answer any questions to the extent I'm not able to. So to get started, this isn't showing up on the screen.
Deborah, we're having a few issues with sharing your screen, so we're going to load up your presentation here.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll advance the slide. for you.
okay. All right. It's fine. So if you can go to the next screen with the history of the Turian Metropolitan Districts, just to give some background here. So in February of 2004, the prior owner of the property annexed about 1,600 acres into the town of Berthoud. That was followed in September of 2004 by Berthoud approving the consolidated service plan for SMPG Metropolitan Districts number 1 through 6. That approval was conditioned upon when the districts were organized, the districts had to come back to amend the service plan to deal with certain conditions that were part of the approval for the 2004 service plan. On December 9, 2004, the districts were officially organized, and in April of 2005, the Berthoud Board approved the amended consolidated service plan for SMPG Metropolitan Districts number 1 through 6. That is the current service plan that exists under which the 6 districts are operating. The Berthoud property was then purchased in 2007 by Front Range Investment Holdings. In 2019, the developer purchased 595 acres adjacent to the Berthoud property, but located in the town of Meade. And then in April of last year, SMPG Metropolitan Districts officially changed their names to the Turian Metropolitan Districts to be consistent with the name of the project and the development called Turian. Now, because this property is the property that's going to be in the districts is also located in the town of Meade. The service plan approval is also required by the town of Meade. We did meet with them, and Meade held a public hearing on the service plan on January 10th. The outcome of that meeting was that they continued it until next Monday, January 31st, pending the outcome of this hearing. I cannot tell you which way they're going to vote, other than we seem to have somewhat positive support. They have to amend their municipal code, which puts in some requirements for service plans regarding the debt repayment period so that it matches what we have in the service plan, and that will be brought up next Monday as well. So that is where the status of Meade's approval is right now. And then if we could go to the next slide to give you a perspective of the location of this project. It is approximately 3 miles, extends 3 miles on the east side of Interstate 25. On the north end in Berthoud, it begins at Well County Road 44 and then goes all the way down to Well County 38 in Meade. And then the next slide. And this picture is just really a vision of the outlay of the proposed development along Interstate 25. It will be the largest master plan community in Berthoud and Meade. It's going to provide residential, commercial, and mixed use development that will provide new market opportunities, business opportunities, job opportunities, for Mead and Berthoud and the surrounding area. Ultimately, at build out, we're looking at 30 years to build out this project due to the size. We're talking about 2,100 acres. At build out, we'll have approximately 5,700 residential units that are made up of single family attached and detached, as well as multifamily homes, and approximately 3.8 million square feet in non-residential development. Then the next slide, please. So the development plans, when we submitted the service plan to the town of Berthoud, it came with a letter describing the service plan and information provided in there. We had indicated that we had hoped to start one of the on-site projects of extending Well County Road 9.5 throughout the down from the north end to the south end, and we had hoped to start that this month, but because we don't have service plan approval until we receive that from both jurisdictions, the plans are delayed, and now in anticipation of receiving approval from both jurisdictions this month, it is anticipated that we'll be able to start that construction later on this year in the fourth quarter. So we have off-site projects starting the second quarter of this year. We're talking about utility infrastructure, and then on-site projects the fourth quarter of this year, beginning into 2023. Now, due to the size of this project, the developer and districts have anticipated 34 phases of construction. When you look at the service plan in Exhibit D, the cost of improvements are actually broken down into 34 different areas, and each area is also identified where it's located, whether or not that area is in Berthoud or if it's in the town of Mead. The construction is anticipated to start on the Berthoud side in the northwest corner of Interstate 25 and Well County Road 44. And again, this is a long-term project with a 30-year build out going all the way through 2051. The next slide, please. So this is kind of the framework of where we anticipate development to be. It will be, the commercial is in the blue area that you see on the map. That's all along Interstate 25. And we'll have commercial in both corners along the service area and the whole development, with some mixed use mixed in there. Some of that will involve retail on the bottom with residential units above it. This map also carves out the 34 areas that are described in the exhibit regarding the cost of improvements. The next slide. This is the existing Turian boundaries. You can see it's divided out between Berthoud and Mead. Right now, districts 1, 5, and 6 are approximately 1 acre. District 2 is about a little under 16, and districts 3, 4, and proposed districts 7 through 21 are about a ½ acre. Now, as development progresses, we will be expanding the boundaries of these districts. And until we know how the area is going to develop, which is all going to be based on market conditions and other factors, the districts will likely be moved around. So districts that are sitting in Berthoud right now might end up in Mead, and some of those Mead districts will likely end up in Berthoud. And the service plan allows for that flexibility to move the districts between the two jurisdictions. The next slide, please. So due to the size of this development of 2,100 acres, it's going to require considerable public infrastructure. And so in the packet and what we presented here is just some depictions of the anticipated public improvements to be put in. The first one is the proposed road network. You can see there that there is the Well County Road 9.5 that begins on the Berthoud side and runs all the way south to the southern end in Meade. Right now, District Number 1 has actually committed approximately $3.1 million to help in the redevelopment of the I-25 and County Road 44 intersection, and they're working with CDOT on that. And then next slide, please.
If I may just mention,
Yes.
I think the board knows this, but this map is oriented so that west is at the top, right? So that the top of the kind of the top line of the map is I-25 for context. And then on the right side of the map is Highway 56 or County Road 44 on that side of I-25.
So this next slide shows the storm system development where swales and ponds are anticipated. Next slide, please. The next slide shows the water system. As indicated in the service plan, water is anticipated to be provided by Little Thompson Water District to the extent the property is in their boundaries, which is most of it. There is a portion that's in Berthoud, and pursuant to an IGA between Berthoud and Little Thompson Water District, if Berthoud ends up providing water to certain properties that are in Little Thompson, the developer will petition to exclude it. So there's no two overlapping entities that are required to provide water. Fire protection, Berthoud Fire Protection District will be providing it on the Berthoud side. And the districts and Berthoud Fire Metro District entered into an IGA regarding that provision back in 2005 when the last service plan was approved. Mountain View Fire Protection District is providing fire on the Meade side. And on August 16th, 2021, Mountain View Fire did approve and consent to the organization of the new districts on the Meade side, and for providing fire services, they will require the districts to enter into a very similar IGA that the existing districts have entered into with Berthoud Fire. Next slide. Okay, the next slide shows sanitary sewer improvements. Right now, Berthoud would be providing sanitary sewer on the Berthoud side, and St. Vrain Sanitation District would provide it on the Meade side. The service plan indicates that based on the sewer facilities for St. Vrain and the location of them to this project, it might actually be more efficient for Berthoud to provide that. So the parties, Berthoud and Meade and St. Vrain, are working together to adjust some boundary provisions as to which entity is required to provide service. Right now, it's supposed to be St. Vrain, but it could be Berthoud depending on the outcome of their discussions. Then next slide, please. Next slide is the open space concept, and it shows proposed parks and trails within the development. And then the next slide. These are just a list of proposed district amenities that will be in development: community recreation center, community pools, playgrounds, sports courts, sport fields, community gardens, trails, recreation parks, interpretive learning and performance venues. Now, with the size of development, with the size of this development and all the public infrastructure that's going to be required, it's going to come at a cost. The total public improvement costs are estimated to be approximately $521 million. There is an Exhibit D to the service plan, a pro forma that allocates those costs out between 2022 through full build out in 2051 as each phase is developed. Using a 1.5% inflation factor, we're estimating total costs at the end of the road in 2051 to be approximately $651 million. Next slide, please. So the service plan has a maximum debt authorization of $738,834,000. And let me tell you what that number is made up of. When you issue debt, there are additional costs involved, and it's not a dollar for dollar exchange where the bond proceeds are equal to your public improvement costs. That number includes approximately 609 million to pay for the public improvements. And then there are costs set aside for debt service reserves, capitalized interest, and cost of issuance, which always usually comes along with the issuance of bonds. So with 600 million proceeds being set aside to pay for the public improvements, and I had just said with the inflation factor, we're looking at approximately 651 million in public improvement costs. That's going to leave a delta of approximately 40 million that the developer will have to pay for. Now, this slide sets forth also the mill levies for the project. We are anticipating up to 3 commercial districts, and we have a lower mill levy for them of 45 mills. The residential district mill levy is 55.664 mills. The current service plan allows 50 mills, and that number has been adjusted for what used to be called Gallagher, but now we're just referring to it as the mill levy adjustment. When the ratio of how the assessed value is calculated changes, we're allowed to adjust the mill levy as well. We're looking at an operating and maintenance mill levy in Berthoud of 18 mills for residential and commercial. That comes to a total mill levy of 73.664 mills for residential and 63 mills for commercial. On the Mead side, you'll see that we've indicated an O&M mill levy of 15 mills only. The reason for that is the town of Mead requires metropolitan districts to impose 3 mills for operation and maintenance, which the revenue from is provided to the town so they can offset any impact from the development that they may have. So since we're required, the districts in Mead will be required to impose 3 mills for that purpose to keep all the districts even and what they're paying and not have it be different on both sides. We've lowered the O&M on the Mead side to 15 mills. Although ultimately everyone's going to have 18 mills to the extent we raise it to the max. Next slide, please. And then just a few items I wanted to talk about in the service plan. There is a public disclosure statement that will be recorded against all the property, and it will always be re-recorded whenever the mill levies change and in those statements, which would be annually. We'll also re-record that statement whenever we include property into the district, so that statement's recorded against all the property within a district. There's an annual report to the town that's required. It's required right now in the current service plan. Mead also has a service plan report requirement. Right now, the current service plan has a deadline of March 1st. Mead's service plan deadline is September 1. Last year, General Assembly also passed a new requirement that all districts have to submit an annual report. We made sure that the provisions in the annual report also match what is being required by state law now. And by state law, their deadline is September 1st there as well. So we've kept the date of September 1st and moved it from March 1. The service plan will have intergovernment agreements entered into with each town and the districts. There currently is an IGA between SMBG, now Turian Metropolitan Districts 1 through 6, and the town of Berthoud pursuant to the current service plan. The service plan does address district dissolution provisions. It indicates in there that if either town trustees believe that the districts have fulfilled their purpose for which they were organized, that they can request that the districts start taking steps towards dissolution. That will require an election of the eligible electors in the districts at that time for a vote to dissolve the districts. However, it also requires that any payment outstanding of debt or O&M or whoever owns the facilities, provisions are made for someone else to take over servicing of those items. Not in the service plan, but just to make the board aware, districts can also consolidate if they feel the need. It would be more efficient to provide services. That could happen here as we build out. We envision 2 or 3 districts probably issuing bonds at one time together, where one's pledging to the other to pay for the public improvements within their area and their phase. It might be over time eventually that they realize it would be more efficient to operate as one district versus 3 or 2 or whatever the case may be. In that case, they would have to pass a resolution, and that also goes to an election where the people in the district vote to consolidate. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. And with that, that is our presentation tonight. I know that's a lot of information, but we're happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
All right, trustees, questions? Trustee Grace?
Oh, making me go first. Okay. So you actually, I had a couple of questions, kind of already prepared, but one of them was there's 20 different metro districts, 1 service district total, the whole project.
The way it will work is district number 1 will be responsible for constructing, operating, and maintaining the public improvements. As the development is kind of phased out, district number 1 is not anticipated like to control all the improvements that are benefit to a certain area. It is anticipated those will be passed on to the individual districts themselves to take care of. This is actually indicated in the general disclosure statement. Charles Norton had asked that we add a provision in there that kind of describes the relationship between District 1 and the other districts kind of long-term. District 1 will hang around though, because there will be regional infrastructure that will need to be taken care of that benefits the entire development. So District 1 in that regard will always be in charge of that. This is a long-term project, so I'm saying that as of today, 25 years ago, or 25 years from now, when we're almost to build out, the districts may realize there's a better way of providing all this.
Well, you actually kind of answered the consolidation option. That is an option. It's also an option I believe we have set in our policies where we can request that metro districts consolidate once they've kind of done what they need to do. You guys come together.
I think maybe you're referring to the dissolution provisions that Mr. Lee was referencing.
Right, yeah, okay, yeah.
And Mayor Karspeck and trustees, I didn't mention before, but Charles Norton is on Zoom joining us. So you have questions for Mr. Norton as well.
The next one on to the, well, I mean, I'm only going to scratch the surface on this, I'm sure, but the mill levies, honestly, looking at it, it's a very big price tag, but it's also a very big project. So kind of get what you pay for there. My concern is the difference in mill levy. And I think you might have addressed this, and correct me if I'm wrong. So the Berthoud side is a 3-point mill levy difference. Ours is a little bit higher than Mead's, but Mead's, they do that. You had it listed because Mead pretty much has a 3 mill levy automatic. If it's a district, we're tacking 3 on top of that to come back to Mead. So in reality, it's both areas are paying the same amount in mill levy.
Correct, that is correct. And in fact, all the districts will be asking a tax increase question that solely addresses the 3 mills that is required to go to Mead. So again, because Mead requires that per their code, that metro districts impose an additional 3 mills on top of whatever they already have. We didn't want there to be a disparity where people on the Mead side were actually even paying more than the people on the Berthoud side.
Sure, absolutely. And that was actually my concern, is because it looked like on paper, the Berthoud half was, or the Berthoud majority of it was going to be paying more. On paper, that's actually not true, but that was a little bit confusing for me to kind of read that. So that was actually a big question I had. Are there any concerns, say, if Mead increases mill levies for certain areas that Berthoud doesn't? Suddenly now you do have that uneven.
There will likely be a disparity anyway, just depending on what all the taxing entities are between the two. If you look at the general disclosure statements, there are ones that cover right now, the districts on the Meade side and the districts on the Berthoud side. And obviously there are different taxing entities. Our goal was just to make sure that the districts, since that's who we're representing, are equal with regard to the mill levy. We don't have any control over what all the other jurisdictions and taxing districts are imposing.
Okay. Because I think I might not be the only one concerned. It's essentially just a lapse in coverage, or, this area is paying too many in mills as opposed to across the street, which is a little bit less. Just kind of a generic.
Right, and we're
concern.
trying to, that's what we're trying to avoid by only having Meade have a 15 O&M mill levy, because they also will be tacked on the 3 mills that go to Meade.
Got it. Okay. The ponds you brought up in the plan, those are anticipated, are those going to be man-made, or is that just stuff that's going to be rainwater that kind of collects in holes that get dug, or is that stuff that's getting pumped in?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer. For the record, Bob Eck, 12650 West 64th Avenue, Unit E, number 274, Arvada, 80004. Okay, let's do that again. So
So the ponds that you have shown kind of the master plan, I know those aren't going to be exactly where they're going to be, but you did mention that those are going to be there.
Yes.
My question is that stuff that's going to be brought in through Little Thompson Water District pumped in, or is it just going to be kind of rainwater aggregate, or how are those going to get created?
So the drainage map that you looked at has several ponds shown on it. Some of those are dry detention ponds. Some of those will be water filled ponds. And that will be mostly for non-potable water usage. So the ones that will hold water.
Good. So like local irrigation, parks, stuff like that?
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, yeah, that was all I was just questioning how there's no ponds out there right now. So I'm curious how you were gonna make that happen. So, okay. I guess the last one, this might be kind of a bigger question that's gonna go down a rabbit hole. The fracking wells on that site. There's one, I'm curious what the reverse setback is on that one for the plan.
I couldn't answer that from a district perspective. That's probably more land use related, unless you have
Yeah, I
information on
mean,
that.
it's from buffering is going to be per whatever Berthoud's ordinance is on it.
Right.
So
So
if that's what you're asking.
right, I guess it was just the question of the way the land was laid out, you can kind of see a pad there, which is fine.
Yeah.
But, with everything else going on with there's, I believe there's reverse setback requirements possibly. I was just curious if that had been anticipated, and if so, how much in terms of how many feet?
Yeah, so I think right now, we have one situation over on just off of County Road 40 that is affecting our property from a reverse setback perspective. And I believe the buffer on that is, I want to say it's like 1,000 feet. It's pretty significant.
Okay.
And so, but within this property, we'll be buffering around some of the oil and gas sites that you saw on maybe on the exhibit. We'll be buffering from those facilities in accordance with the town's ordinance.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Mayor Karsbeck, if I may mention, partially in answer to Trustee Grace's question, but just in general, I think it's important to remember that the Metro District Service Plan is not a land use approval. So we're not granting them any land use rights they don't have already in their overall development plan that was approved a long time ago as part of their PUD zoning. But this is not a land use approval. So I know there was some concern expressed via email by constituents that you're approving houses next to oil wells. That is not part of this approval. We're not approving houses. We're not approving subdivision plats. None of that is occurring as part of this service plan review. This is not a land use decision in that
Gotcha.
sense.
So this is essentially whether or not the metro districts and the service plans are in agreement with us.
This is primarily related to the governance and financing of the metro districts. This is not a land use approval.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think that was the bulk of my questions, sir.
Any questions?
How do we get 3 mill levies? Or how do we get 3%?
That would have been a town code provision. I mean, this is written
We're
into
too
their,
late, huh?
this is written into their municipal code.
Actually, all I have are land use
Okay.
questions, so I think this seems pretty, I don't want to say cut and dry, but it's pretty dry anyway, so. That's all I have. there.
Member Temp, Trustee Hyman, any questions?
Yeah, so this is incredibly complex, so I don't know that I'm comfortable making a decision on it tonight. Which, could you elaborate on what, if we wanted to postpone a decision on this till the next meeting, what step would, what the right procedure would be to do that?
Maybe I'll defer to Aaron Smith or Charles Norton from that perspective. And they are joining us both electronically, so.
Attorney Smith, are you on?
I am, Mayor Karsbeck.
PR, we can't hear you. I think last time we went through the presentation and then stopped before public comment.
Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering is, that, yeah, I just would like to hear what the procedure is.
So I've been unmuted. Can you hear me?
While we're trying to get that sorted out via Zoom, there's a question about the additional mill levy in Mead. We've talked about that a little bit internally. It's obviously not part of our code, but the vast majority of the commercial development that's planned in the Turian project is in the town of Berthoud. And as you all know, the majority of our revenue comes from sales taxes. The majority of the major commercial areas we expect will be in Berthoud in a way that Mead won't have access to, I think in the same way for future sales tax development. And so from a mill levy perspective, we didn't feel like it was necessary to try and adjust our codes to try and impose additional mill levies on development for operations and maintenance, especially in this context where we'll already have higher property tax revenues from the commercial development as well as sales taxes that will be generated in the future.
So though this might be a land use thing, do you know commercial first or commercial last, or do you know how that works?
You mean in terms of the timing for them?
Right.
I'm sure it'll be market driven. I really have no idea, but if, I don't want to answer for Bob or Turian, but if I was them, I'd build it as soon as I could fill it.
Generally, our experience in town is last.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, there are commercial uses, I think the market, you know, rooftops drive retail, right? I mean, that's always kind of the message, unless you're talking about regional destination retail, in which case maybe that happens sooner. I think they intend to build some residential first. And I think some of that is grading and other issues that'll help adjust site elevations and things for future commercial and non-residential development. But am I getting that mostly right, Bob?
Yeah, you're right on it, Chris. So yeah, what Chris said is accurate.
Okay.
I can add to that or not.
I would appreciate it because this is like a finance.
So, so yes, with regard to the first phase of development, it'll be largely residential for the main reason Chris stated, and that is we're gonna be moving a lot of dirt around to actually build pads for non-residential development in that first phase. And so once those are built, we don't have the map up, but the village center where the internal village center, that whole area will be built at the same time as the first residential units.
Can we put up the map?
That's northwest corner of the property.
Yeah, it's pretty much centrally located in
See.
let's go to the map.
Yeah, let's get a visual here.
There you go.
You
Let's
you
use
want
that
the
one.
Map that says framework.
Yeah,
plan.
framework plan, so that we
Yes.
can identify by colors. It's much easier.
Blue.
So it would be the purple. If you had, do you have the map in front of you?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. It's the purple area that you see that's labeled village center.
On the northern end.
northern end, just to the kind of southeast of the Little Thompson. So that pad gets built with the first phase of development, which is also in the northeast corner of the property, which is identified in the yellow. You know, I mean, there's a lot of yellow there, but it's the yellow component in the northeast corner. The other thing I would say too, to the question that was asked about, Chris is accurate, rooftops, you know, usually precede commercial development or retail development.
That'd be the top right corner, that kind of red area.
Yeah,
Top right
correct.
corner of that.
We think that's very viable, very early in the project, not as dependent upon rooftops or dependent upon trips.
Traffic, like our Loves, which didn't require loop.
Exactly.
Or Sanitary, which started out with commercial. Okay, for staff or anyone, did we know our total millage in town for a town resident without, not metros? Talking fire, school.
I can tell you, but I don't know off the top of my head. It is for all intents and purposes outlined in those disclosure notices. So that'll show you kind of what the current taxing entities are, what like an estimated mill levy might be. It's probably pretty close, but I can tell you exactly. I just need to look it up. I don't remember. off the
For
top of my head.
us, not for Wilson.
We're talking about the total mill levy assessed on a piece of property in town currently,
Right.
excluding a metro district.
Yes.
So fire district, library, school district, town, so on and so forth.
Right.
I can tell you that number. I just don't know it off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I will look it up for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's probably different in Weld County.
Right, with
It is,
RE5
yeah,
and,
Yeah.
but for the majority of town in, as you know, the vast majority of our development is in Larimer County. I can tell you relatively quickly here.
you know how long estimated the, well, I guess that's the land use thing too.
I do have other questions while we're waiting for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I am really interested in part of the executive summary that we got included. The debt may also include privately placed debt, defined as debt that is placed directly with the purchaser without the use of an underwriter as the purchaser and reseller of the debt. And it says this privately placed debt may include developer debt, defined as bonds, notes, contracts, other multiple year financial obligations issued by the districts directly to the developer to reimburse it for sums, advance it to pay for public improvements. It just seems like it's almost double dealing, that the developer is lending money to get a bond that it's gonna buy, that the residents will then pay back. Like, I was trying to make a flow chart to see where the money goes, and I got totally confused.
The
So,
developer debt would not be there to pay back the same amount of outstanding from bond proceeds. It's carved out. We have a special developer debt limitation that is in the service plan that we believe includes some reasonable parameters to keep that under control and to address concerns when it comes to developer debt. First, it can't exceed our debt cap. Obviously, no debt can, no matter what form we're issuing it in. It's also going to be subordinate to any of the bonds that have been issued, so paying it back. The other bonds that districts have issued get paid first before any developer debt, if and when it gets issued, would be repaid. We have put in a reasonable interest rate component of 2% plus prime, and it cannot exceed 8%. It also is going to require us to obtain an external advisor opinion that that opines on the reasonableness of the interest rate and maturity and repayment structure. And finally, to the extent any developer debt is still outstanding after 25 years, it's automatically discharged.
So my question is, why? Why is it in there? I don't know if it's a standard part of other Metro District service plans, but I just don't recall seeing it in prior service plans. So
I see it in certain jurisdictions. Some are more flexible with it than others.
so what's the purpose of having that special carve out?
Kyle, do you want to address developer debt versus
Sure.
the rest of the
Yeah.
financing?
Yeah, sure. Kyle Thomas, DA Davidson, 1500 Market Street, Denver, Colorado. So in general, the goal is to utilize the capital markets to fund the project. What we can't predict is what the capital markets will be in the future. So there could be a point in time when the district needs to build infrastructure and the capital markets aren't willing to take the credit risk or provide that capital, or maybe the rate isn't appropriate. There's just not a funding mechanism. So the developer, realizing that they want to keep this project moving forward, could choose to step in and be that capital partner, provide the funds necessary to build the infrastructure. And the mechanism by which they do that is through a developer bond. They would get paid back just like any other investor who's choosing to invest in this project, and they would get paid back by the district over time. Typically, this is a short-term product where if you have infrastructure that needs to be built, there's a specific time when that needs to be built. If the capital market isn't accepting, then you would put that instrument in place. Typically, the provisions of that instrument are such that they can be refinanced easily as soon as the capital markets are willing to provide that capital. So it's a mechanism by which the district can continue funding infrastructure, knowing that we're putting together a plan over 30 years, and it's hard to predict what the capital markets will be at that time.
Okay, so the developer has deep enough pockets that they could continue to fund it if market conditions are not conducive to issuing bonds. So that they can continue the project. So that helps me to understand it. Obviously, I'm not a financial person, so the way in which it is done and the wording that is used, I mean, we just have to lay our trust that this is going to be all kosher in the future with the residents of that development. So that it just concerns me that I've never seen that before. And it also, so if the developer could have enough resources to do that stopgap measure, do we need as high a mill levy as what you guys are proposing if the developer has those resources? Just a question is the mill levy, it's the max that you can do. But certainly there are lower mill levies that could be done if the developer has enough funds to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, so a fair question. I think as you look at a project and as a developer is putting together their capital stack, there's a variety of costs to deliver any project. There's a whole lot of public infrastructure, which we've talked about, to the neighborhood of $600 million. There's a lot of private development costs as well for developing lots that are going to be sold. For all of those costs, if there was no district at all, and it was just all funded through lot sales, then the price of the home is going to have to be drastically different. The price that lots are sold is going to be drastically different to be able to fund all that infrastructure. So part of the holistic plan is utilizing a variety of financing tools, one of which, and a critical piece, is utilizing Metro District Finance to generate capital to build these infrastructure improvements. What we can't predict is when that capital will be available. So it'd be great if someone would show up and say, here's $600 million and go build all of this today, and we're going to offer it to you at 2%. Like, that would be great, but that's not reasonable. And so the service plan is drafted in a way to give flexibility to be able to fund the infrastructure over time, knowing that if the developer has to step in and be that capital provider, it's still the intent, going back to their original pro forma of how they can actually make this project pencil, that they're going to get paid back at some point in the future for that infrastructure.
Okay, next question. the original service plan for the much smaller development initially, the service plan from 2004, 2005, it had a bond debt at market rate, 12% max. And now this new one, oh, and the discount, the highest discount to the underwriter could be 5%. So this one says the maximum discount to the underwriter is 4%, which is an improvement. I appreciate that. Maximum interest rate is still 12%, but now the bond is not market rate. It's bond index plus 3%. So we're adding on a 3% bonus onto those bonds. And I'm wondering why we had no addition onto market rate, and now we have 3% addition onto market rate.
So I don't have the language right in front of me for that prior service plan. We'd have to look at what the definition of market rate is. I think the spirit of this language is to actually define what that is based on a predefined benchmark and defining a spread, as opposed to just a general term of market rate is up to interpretation as to what that means. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, because here it says specifically 20 bond geo index, and the prior one, it did not have it linked to a specific bond index.
So I think that's just relying on whoever chooses to opine on what market rate is, as opposed to this language is a very specific.
More specific.
Yeah.
Okay. So in trying to keep the rate of the charges that are applied across both districts in Meade and in Berthoud, because of Meade's current ordinances, they're getting 3 mil bonus going to the town on every property that's within their district, and we are not. None of it is coming back to our town. So I find, that is challenging for me to accept as a Berthoud trustee.
For clarity, they will still pay our mill levy rate that gets applied to every property in town. So our mill levy rate in 2021 was 9.6.
And is theirs 12?
I honestly don't know what Meade's general mill levy rate is, but so we'll collect property taxes from every property in the district that gets developed, just like we do every property in town.
Right.
We're just not adding on a 3 mil levy. We're not adding an additional 3 mills like Meade is. That's the only difference.
The idea behind that didn't sound like it was to collect to bring it to the town, but for extra services needing to be provided out there.
I think they're suggesting that, I don't want to speak for me, but my understanding is they want to collect additional mill levy to provide operations and maintenance of infrastructure in the district.
Yeah,
But I don't know if that limitation is there, or if it just goes into their general fund like any other mill levy, property tax mill levy. I honestly don't know. I don't want to speak for me. But in response to your earlier question, the mill levy in 2021 for any property in town not included in a metro district is a little more than 95 mills. So the biggest chunk of that, about a third, is the school district. Larimer County is another 22 plus mills. The fire district is about 13 and a half, 14 mills, and then the town is 9.656 or was in 2021. And then, we've got Thompson School Bonds, Berthoud Community Library, Thompson Valley Healthcare, Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, and Larimer County Pest Control District. They're all part of that total mill levy amount, but a little more than 95 mills.
Mine is just to follow up on what was already said. So Kyle, you said the price point would be different with the lower mill levy on the final product, on the final home. But wouldn't the market dictate, wouldn't you guys go for the maximum amount for a house no matter what? More profit?
Yeah, so market forces certainly dictate the price of real estate. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So we're getting into the details of what would make a project make sense and what would make a project not make sense. And at what price point are you targeting? In that scenario, might a different mix of product type have to make sense for the project to work? That could be. So I don't, that's certainly in the developer's court as to what they're building. I'll just speak as to what the Metro District is funding, but all these things are related. Certainly what what a district funds is critical to even being able to deliver a project.
I guess I'll save for comments.
Okay.
If we get there tonight.
Well, yeah, so we get Aaron and Charles on the line.
I mean, I know we're good to ask questions.
I think they're still working on it.
Okay, well, so I'll go ahead and do questions, but before we get public comment or discussion, I want to be clear on what we need to do to postpone.
So it is a quasi judicial proceeding, and so, you know, we have some criteria that you have some findings that you have to make, right, in order to either approve or disapprove the service plan amendment. You'd have to make a decision that you need additional information, or you don't have enough information tonight to address the criteria. So you could move to continue.
In which case we'd continue the public hearing,
So that's.
but we would not have discussion or findings tonight because we'd still be getting input.
That's true.
Correct.
Yeah, you would want some specific questions that you needed to be answered in order to continue.
So we really need counsel, so.
Well, other than the fact that it's 500 pages long, but anyway.
Right, so my home, sorry, real quick, but if we could just get them on a phone, but no matter what, we're having a public hearing, we need counsel.
Mayor Carspec, we will be dialing Aaron Smith on the telephone line. She'll be sending us her phone number so that we can get her connected. It'll be just a few more moments.
That's okay. So,
Mayor,
Mayor?
Mayor, it's
This is by
Charles.
far the most complex development that's, as far as I know, ever come to the town of Berthoud. And on top of that, it's partly in Berthoud and partly in Mead, which I'm not wild about. I see that there's potential issues on that. But anyway, to explain the concept of the service district, of which there's only one, versus the financing districts, of which there's many. So that I can understand that.
Okay, we'll have one district that will be in charge of constructing all the infrastructure to start and providing all the operation and maintenance. And eventually, as development occurs and there's enough assessed valuation in there, certain districts, 2 to 3 districts, if you look at the financial plan, it's kind of broken down by 3 districts with 10 bond issuance, will issue bonds and pay back district number 1 for its funding that it will likely either get from the developer or acquire any improvements from the developer that the developers put in. And I need to clarify, we're talking public improvements only, not private improvements that the developer is responsible for doing. So District 1 will take care of everything so long as the development is ongoing. And at a certain point in time, when there are end users, meaning residents in the districts, if they wish to take over, they can. One thing I did not touch upon, the service plan requires or anticipates, and this will occur, the districts to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with each other that sets forth each district's roles and responsibilities. That intergovernment agreement will allow the individual districts an out. So if they reach a point where they want to operate and maintain their own improvements within their districts, they can give a 90-day notice, and at the end of the year, District 1 will move out and give title over to the districts where the improvements are located, and they can move forward and do that. Usually you do have, especially in multiple district structure this size, one district that also takes care of paying for all the administrative issues like insurance, accounting, legal, and then, of course, the operation and maintenance. They also will have an option in that IGA. If they don't want District 1 to provide it anymore, they can get out. So they'll always have the ability the individual districts will always have the ability to take over their own improvements and operation and maintenance, and also do their own administrative services if that's what they decide would be beneficial for them. As long as there's no impact on any bonds that have been issued, depending on how bonds were written at that point in time. But I just want to make it clear, it's not District 1 is not beholden forever, and District 1 can get out too if they don't want to continue on and say, here you go, 2, 3, and 4. These are your improvements sitting within your districts. You can take them over. So everyone's going to have an out at some point in time in the process.
Hi, Christian. Hi, Michelle.
Let's just wait a second until she.
And can you both hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Charles, can you hear? Charles, can you hear?
Thanks for that. Sure. Can you hear me now?
I can hear the board.
All right.
Okay. And it looks,
Is on the phone, and I think he was able to hear you initially, but looks like he's not.
okay. Well, I'll call him back again.
My apologies.
So
But we still have
while
Attorney
she's,
Smith, yeah.
while she's dialing, District 1. So if the other districts, you have language to allow the other districts to take their own infrastructure debt and run it themselves. There's language in there to allow that.
There will be, yeah,
There will
that's how the intergovernmental agreements are
Yeah.
usually drafted nowadays, when you have a multiple district structure where everyone can take their stuff and go to the point that it's efficient and there's no violation of any of the bond documents to the extent bonds were issued at that point in time.
And so District 1, each district has their.
If we could just wait. It's on Zoom, can hear what's going on.
I was just asking about the legality, so as long as we can hear it, and Christian can write minutes, we should be good. All right, that was me, sorry. Go ahead. Okay. I'm gonna call the meeting back to order. It's 8:45, and we'll continue where we left off. And that I think was, oh yeah, Attorney Smith.
Yes.
So what would
Continue to a date certain.
Okay, and will we do that after public comment?
You can do that at any point. So yes, you could certainly do that after public comment.
Can we have discussion, or can we deliberate, or do we have to not deliberate until the continuation?
Yes, I mean, part of your deliberation is the necessity for additional information to meet your criteria. So a lot of times, whether or not you've gotten all the information you need to meet the criteria is something that may come out in deliberation. However, I would encourage you to ask the questions to get as much information as you can. And then before moving to deliberation, arrive at one or more trustees could arrive at a point where that trustee personally doesn't feel that they have received enough information and to then make the motion.
Yeah, so that to me means that we can't really deliberate. If we want more information, we would continue it prior to having discussion.
Right, and it would keep the evidentiary portion of the hearing open.
Right.
Okay, I answer your question. Sounds like it.
Yeah, so that means to me, if we don't feel like we are ready to make a decision tonight, after we have the question period and then I guess public comment, we can continue it, and that would keep the hearing open for more information prior to making a decision at the next meeting.
We want to keep public comment open just in case there's someone at the next meeting.
What would we do? I think we can just continue it and we could get more public comment the next time.
Attorney Smith, so if we go through public comment and we wanted to hear more public comment at the next meeting, I would just not close the public comment.
That is correct.
Other questions?
Yeah, so we recently had a Metro District information review with Mr. Norton, our attorney is on the line. But one of the questions I asked, there was a series of articles in the Denver Post last year on Metro districts. And, I don't have all that detailed information in front of me. It was pretty detailed investigative reporting. But there was numerous examples of what I remember being called junior bonds being issued to the insiders in the development that were then later cashed out at huge premiums and really high interest rates 30 years down the road, 15 years down the road. And Mr. Norton, Attorney Norton, said that we would be able to prohibit those in future Metro districts. So my question is, are those in this current service plan? And if so, what would we need to do to exclude those?
That is really addressed with the whole developer debt concept that's in there. We carved out provisions that we believe are reasonable parameters to keep that in check, where we're not ending up like some of the developers are in your Denver Post articles that you've read about. We actually, this service plan restatement, just so everyone knows, Mead actually has a model service plan. And obviously we already had our birthed service plan. So we kind of took their model and started working from that, where it's not word for word. We didn't want to give up authority of what we already had in there, but they had developer debt provisions in there with some carve out provisions in it. And we've just added to it where we've kind of taken it and created its own separate paragraph of a developer limitations that sets forth our interest rate won't be any higher than this. After 25 years, anything outstanding is paid back. It is subordinate to all the other debt. So it is possible that developer debt could be issued, but because the districts are paying mill levies to pay off the existing bonds that they've issued in the marketplace, that at the end of 25 years, nothing might have been paid on that developer debt and it would just go away. That's the way it is written.
Show us where
Sure.
in what section of the agreement that's
If you
outlined.
go to page 14 in the service plan and page 18.
Page 14, where it says developer debt limitation.
Yes. And then on page 18. Page 18 at the top is the developer debt mill levy and position term. That indicates it would be discharged after 25 years.
Okay. Okay, so one thing, we did get a memo, confidential memo from our attorney outline state statute when we must disapprove and when we may disapprove of metro districts. But it didn't give us any kind of an assessment or recommendation as far as this service plan. It just outlined our options. And since I am not an expert in these complex agreements, and I mean, this is even more complex because of the Mead birthed situation, I would like to request that we get, so when we get a memo from the planning department about land use decisions, it says, here's the criteria that have to be met, and here's why staff believes they've been met. So therefore, staff recommends approval or denial based on the criteria. So I would like to see our legal counsel give us that same sort of a recommendation that, yes, we've heard what the town board is saying. This, we believe, meets all the criteria and concerns that you had. And yes, this is going to be a good agreement for the town in the future. So that's just one thing that I would like to request prior to the next meeting, if we decide to continue it. Anyway, and then I'll make the rest of my questions. So the other thing that was outlined is that these districts are starting out very small, but they can be expanded over time. What's the purpose of that? Why not have these districts certain geographical areas at the beginning?
They usually always start small until you know where the development is actually going to be and how much the phasing is going to exist. And then we will expand the boundaries to cover the certain areas as we go. So it's really all part of the development and the phasing as it gets built out over 30 years.
So is that normal and typical to
Yeah.
metro districts?
Some, I mean, some of the smaller, I can't tell you they're all like that. Some of the smaller ones might already know where all the boundaries are going to be because they have a build out of 2 or 3 years or even 5 years. And so you have a better idea of where your ultimate boundaries are going to be. But when you have a project this size being built out over 30 years, that's not necessarily, you know, a known at this point. It's just better to do it as you go versus to create all the boundaries and then we'd still be able to include and exclude as we go, but that just adds more of a procedure process.
Do any of those future service district or not metro district boundary adjustments, do those come back to the town board or those are all just handled within the metro district?
It's all handled in the Metro District. Special District Act allows, the way that process goes is the property owner, the developer will petition the particular district that they want to include the property that's in a certain service area into a particular district's boundary. The districts will hold a public hearing on the petitions, and then we'll file a motion with the court asking for an order for inclusion of that property. And once we get the order, it gets recorded, and upon recording, it is effectively in that district.
Okay. So I certainly see there's a lot of regional improvements here. That's, you know, because this is a undeveloped piece of land, the infrastructure needs are, you know, pretty great, right? There's not a lot of services in this area. So one of those is I think it's County Road 9 or the Great Plains Boulevard. So that's something that has been discussed at the board, I don't know, going back 3 or 4 years. That's a regional CDOT. I don't know if it's a CDOT or it's just Weld County.
It's Weld County Road 9.5. CDOT helped lead the kind of creation of the overall master plan alignment for that road because it'll effectively replace the frontage road. And so
Right.
CDOT had a helping hand in getting that organized, but the preliminary alignment and all the technical design criteria were all agreed on by the various jurisdictions that make up that route, including Weld County.
Right, but my point, I guess, is that Berthoud has agreed to that plan. And we don't have funding for that road.
We will not be constructing that road. The town
So-
will not be constructing. that road.
Right, so this metro district will, in essence, construct that for us.
That's true.
And as we heard earlier, there's been a lot of money committed to that project already, even in advance of the new metro district being updated.
Actually, the money that's been committed has been to the I-25 County Road 44 interchange with CDOT. That's where we've committed the funds right now. The expectation is that one of the first major on-site projects that are supposed to start within the districts upon service plan approval will be the beginning construction of County Road 9.5.
Okay. That would not be funded unless this metro district plan is approved.
The entire project is depending on service plan approval to make it happen. Otherwise, without district support of the public infrastructure, it likely would not be able to go forward as planned.
Right. And then similarly, right now we have a liquid only sewer treatment plant, I believe.
We cannot currently handle solids at the regional plant.
Right. So what level of funding will these metro districts provide to develop and upgrade the regional sewer plant that was a joint venture with Johnstown versus, you know, the town's commitment, or the town's share of upgrading that facility?
The development funded a portion of that regional plan to begin with. I think it was $1 million. Right? So that was before my time, but they've already contributed funds to the development of that regional plant, and they will contribute funds to the expansion of that regional plant that are consistent with their development agreement and with their impact on the system.
So I guess my question is, will current town sewer customers be funding any of that regional plant upgrades, or is that all going to be funded by this development?
The expansion of that plant would be funded by capital improvement fees, developer contributions potentially from Johnstown, who've already approached us about expanding that plant. They have an obligation under our IGA with them to pay for the expansion of that plant that they use. So it'll be a combination of sources, but it will not be relied on the ratepayers in town to cover the costs of the expansion of that plant.
But we are using some of our funds.
We will have to use some of those funds for sure. Those capital expansion.
Yeah,
funds.
the capital funds.
There are existing developments that paid capital expansion funds like Love's, Serenity Ridge, those that are tied into that sewer plant already. And so in some sense, those existing town residents will pay, but we will not be expanding the plant by issuing bonds associated with the ratepayers and current ratepayers in town. I don't think we have a need to do that.
Right, so I guess my question is, will the metro district be paying for that, or it's just the impact fees from the development that
Metro
will be
District
paying
will
that?
have financial contributions to the expansion of all utilities in that area. And without the Metro District, there won't be any utilities expanded in that area.
But as far as the plant itself, I realize they're gonna be putting in the pipes in the ground. But as far as the plant expansion and upgrade, which is gonna be required by this development,
They will be paying for expansion of that plant.
How much of it?
We haven't made that determination.
Right. So we don't know if they're gonna cover, if they're gonna have a 90% impact, we don't know if they're gonna have a 90% coverage of those fees.
There's a lot of discussion about what will get built out there in the future and what will their proportional share be. And then their development agreement talks about how that gets done. They have an existing development agreement that was approved in 2004 about how those finances occur, the reimbursements that happen as a result of financial contributions that they make, but we're not asking the existing town residents to pay for the expansion of that plant for their benefit.
okay? And then I was a little confused by the water service. So the way I remember historically, Perth had fought really hard 25 years ago to control the development of this property, both because it's a huge revenue source for the town, but also because otherwise it was going to be developed by Johnstown, which it's the Berthoud exit. So there was a lot of opposition to that being developed, driving through Johnstown to get to Berthoud. But part of that was controlling the utilities in this area. And so we negotiated an IGA with Little Thompson, whereby Berthoud would be the water provider. And I thought it was for all of the Berthoud section of this property, but from reading the exhibits, it sounds like only a portion of the Berthoud property is Berthoud's according to the IGA. So I'd like to see a copy of the IGA.
So
to see which is which.
On the Berthoud side of the line, in terms of Turian versus Berthoud and Mead, on the Berthoud side, there's only a very small portion of the development that's still in the Little Thompson service area. The rest of it is in Berthoud's service area for water. Ned mentioned before, or maybe it was Bob, but we think it makes sense for the town to provide sewer to the entire site, even that area that's within Mead, but there are some 208 boundary adjustments that have to happen to make that possible. But we think it makes sense for the town to be the sewer provider for the entire project.
So for us to be the water provider for all of the Berthoud portion, we would have to renegotiate.
Little Thompson would have to give up existing service territory.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see that before the next meeting. I'd like to see the IGA with Little Thompson so I can just understand which part of it. So we're gonna have a Berthoud section where portion of it is gonna be Little Thompson infrastructure and billing and tap fees.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conversations about the ultimate water provider for the project, and I don't know if that's finally settled. We've talked about a whole, I don't know that it's worth trying to get into the details because it's complicated in terms of how water gets provided to the project in the future, where that water comes from, how it gets treated, how it gets distributed. Right now, Little Thompson has some of the project in their service territory, and we have some in our service territory. We've discussed a lot of options for how that looks in the future, both in the short term and in the future. Little Thompson has existing distribution infrastructure in the area that could be utilized for the initial phases before we build additional water infrastructure to serve the project. And then it's possible those areas would then convert back to Berthoud for service in the future, or we serve them through a master meter like we do for Sanitary, Ridge and Loves. But there's a lot of those options on the table, but none of that has been finalized.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'd like to review the IGA, and again, my concern would be that all the new. Well,
I'm sorry for clarity. Are you talking about an IGA between Berthoud and
Little
Thompson? Okay.
Yeah, because that's.
I've honestly never seen one. So
it's 20 years old. Well, there's a map. And I'm thinking that it's the far east portion, central portion, where this jogs east.
It is.
That's
What's in Little Thompson.
That's in Little T, right?
That's correct.
Because originally the 1,400 acre Wilson Ranch was all we thought was going to be master metered by Berthoud. But again, my concern would be that this development and the metro districts, since it's for the purpose of paying for infrastructure, that they be paying for not just the pipes in the ground, but also the extra treatment capacity, the raw water, and everything associated with bringing water to the development, so that there's no burden on the existing town ratepayers or on our current capital improvement fees. Anyway, so that's it for me, and that's the additional information I would like.
Okay. Other questions?
For the Metro District, number one being the overall infrastructure, 20 or so smaller ones. Is this an all or nothing, or can we approve, disapprove based on residential versus commercial or infrastructure versus?
You couldn't do that tonight.
Well, no,
I don't think.
For those options that we can bring back.
I think I would have to defer to Mr. Norton. I'm not sure I know the answer to that question.
We discussed Metro districts just for commercial, not for residential.
So I will remind the board, they have an existing service plan that and Metro District that covers that originally approved Berthoud area. They're trying to modify that to amend it, both to bring it current with, the dollar amounts for construction today, which are obviously very different than 2004. There's some governance changes associated with sub-districts and those things, the inclusion of the Mead area. But they already have residential and commercial approved in their existing service plan. Does that make sense?
So there's already an
So,
approved
so it's not like,
metro district.
we're approving a service plan from scratch. We're approving amendments, or we're not approving that, at your discretion, I suppose. But we're approving amendments to an existing service plan. We're not creating a new service plan or a new metro district. Does that make sense?
We already have a metro district, we're just approving the new numbers.
We're approving new numbers. There's inclusion areas that are new. There's a different governance structure that's being outlined and some of those details, but it's not, this is not a new metro district, right?
However, it is a different mill rate from what I saw in the paperwork we got on the prior metro district. The maximum service amount was 50, and then the operations and maintenance was 15. That's what I pulled out of the documents that was in our packet.
That's a question, I guess. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Is that correct? Did I read that
No,
correct?
you read that correct, but the mill levies in the original service plan allowed to be adjustment, which used to be called the Gallagher adjustment. Now it's just a mill levy adjustment that's allowed whenever there's a change in ratio by the state of the assessed valuation ratio, which has occurred. So right now, the district has authority to impose a 55.664 mill levy based on the authority it has in the existing service plan for debt. The O&M was 15 in the original, we're at 18 now, given the size of the project and the passage of time and the cost of maintaining things today than it did in $2005.
And I will say, from a practical standpoint, many of the metro districts that we have in town struggle with operations and maintenance. And there are some that have additional operations and maintenance fees on top of their existing mill levy. And they do okay. But the ones that rely only on their operations and maintenance mill levy for maintaining their open spaces and parks and all those other things, they, especially early on, as assessed valuation is increasing, they've struggled to maintain their improvements.
So why was the metro district approved so long ago when they weren't intending to build back then?
Well, I think they had every intention of building. I honestly couldn't answer that question. I don't think they went through they spent a lot of money at the original developer on plans and PUD approvals and ODP approvals and annexation. I can only assume they intended to build.
2008
Yeah, I mean,
was the financial collapse. So
yeah,
that probably explains it.
yeah.
Yeah, the amounts was really like almost laughable. The maximum to be borrowed was, wouldn't cut anything up. The question I have is, in the existing, I should say, the existing metro district, does it have separate mills assigned for commercial and residential?
No, it
Because
did
I could
not.
only find one.
No, it did not. It was
Okay.
just,
It was just flat.
yeah.
Good question.
I guess this is for staff. So approving this is solely a financial instrument. How would it be affected by future land use regulation changes that we might want to enact?
So obviously their financial assumptions are based on, projected build outs and some expectation of the number of units that'll be sold and average prices of those units and all those kinds of things, right? It's a lot like budgeting, right? I mean, I've said it before, the only thing I can guarantee you about our proposed budget is that we'll be wrong. It's just how wrong we'll be in the future. And hopefully we've been conservative in our estimates, right? And nobody can predict what will happen in 15 or 20 years. That said, one particular land use conversation that I think you've discussed in the past, so I think it's reasonable to discuss here. You've never made a decision about this, but increasing the reverse setbacks from existing oil wells could significantly impact their future build out scenarios, and that would change their financial plan.
So would they come back to us then to amend it, or would you be able to adjust your own plan to suit the new reality of the land use?
Actually, before, if you don't mind putting into that, we'll also need to go back and look at their original PUD approval. Their overall development plan is like its own development code, right? And so I mean, it's like over 200 pages long, right? It addresses everything from infrastructure to landscaping to architecture and all kinds of things. It also addresses development approvals and how those occur, which development code provisions can impact the development and which ones are set by the PUD. So I used oil setbacks as an example. That may not apply based on their originally approved or currently approved overall development plan. I'm just suggesting that if that was something that was impacting their development, it would be a significant impact. But I don't know if it does or not, just so that we're clear. Only because I haven't looked into it yet.
This is also on our own development from PUD.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
The zoning is all still the old PUD
Their
process.
current zoning is PUD.
So we'll be looking at future zoning. Possibly on this as
It
well.
depends. I think it depends on how far they plan to deviate from their original PUD. But PUD is a lot like, their PUD approval came with zoning designations, future land uses, maps, infrastructure. Again, it's a whole overall development plan. We've kind of joked before that there were PUDs approved in town that were like on the back of a napkin decades ago. It's like a one-page map with no.
Probably wasn't a joke. Probably actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, with no detail, and it's really hard to look at those and make some determination about whether or not their proposed overall development plan is consistent with that PUD map. It's different here. Their PUD and their overall development plan have an extensive amount of detail in them. So we have discussed, depending on what they ultimately submit, about whether or not we believe they should have to go through an overall development plan amendment process. I think their intent is not to do that, but I don't want to speak for Bob, but I think they intend to develop under their original overall development plan.
They're staying quiet, so I'm not sure that's the case.
Well, I don't know that they want to commit one way or the other. I'm not asking them to tonight. They have not formally submitted.
This is not a,
So-
as Chris said, this is not about land use approvals tonight, so.
Mayor Pro Tem Todd, is there any other questions? Okay, at this time, thank you. I'll open it up to public comment. And we do have Lynn Larson signed up. Well, I guess I already tried it, so yeah, we'll do that again. Mr. Larson, go ahead.
Lynn Larson, 205 Hubble Street. As many times as I've driven down Weld County 11 and 44, it was only this past weekend that I noticed the oil well there and the oil tanks. And you've more or less addressed my questions, but one of the questions was, what is the setback? How is that going to affect the development? And more to the infrastructure, I don't know what the piping and underground is. How will the piping for that oil well and infrastructure impact on their putting in their roads, their sewer, their water, etc.? How are they going to deal with the existing pipes? I just raised that question. You sort of answered part of it. It's a land use question apparently, but if they're doing infrastructure under these metro districts, seems to me they have to consider where the existing piping for oil wells, et cetera, is there. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak and didn't have a chance to sign up? Anyone online? Okay, sound like any?
There's nobody raising their hand.
Yeah, so anyway, I just would like to suggest that we continue the public hearing, especially in light of the technical difficulties. I'm not sure we even know if all the people who might want to say something are able to say something, but I just, I'd like to
suggest we continue the public hearing until February 8th.
Somebody agree with it? Okay,
That wasn't a motion, that was just a discussion.
that's not good, everyone.
Sounds good.
I don't know if we, yeah, I guess we need a motion, huh? Okay. Trustee Hyman, would you like to move on that?
If you're continuing it, could we have a date certain as to when that will occur? Were you-
February 8th, does that work?
I'm sorry, February 8th, okay, because we were scheduled to go back to meet next Monday for them to hopefully approve it, so I'll have to deal and talk to them about, they'll probably continue that hearing again, pending the outcome of Berthoud's decision.
Sure.
This could be a chicken and the egg. How long could that go on?
We're laughing, you guys aren't though. I-
They
we're-
had this conversation with me too. They
We're waiting for
recognize we
them,
can't
they're
just
waiting
keep
for us,
going
so-
back and forth, but they seemed, the impression I got when we left last week, with the exception of maybe changing their code so it fits with what we were asking with the debt limitation term in there, that if Berthoud was going to have changes or had any issues, they needed to have that opportunity to address that. Otherwise, they didn't have any other questions at that point in time. So that's why they
get it.
continued it. And we were going to go back on Monday.
Yes.
The only thing that I would like, I mean, because this is a lot of stuff and most of it's over my head. The one thing that I'd like is the recommendation from our legal counsel.
Yeah, I think, so is it all right if we just use all trustee Hyman's recommendations, what he wants to see? One of those was that.
Yeah, that's the main one for me.
Okay, I think, is that okay with everything? Okay, so it sounds like the motion was to postpone until February 8th. Continue till that February 8th, thank you. Is there a second on that? Trustee Grace, clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Well, hang on a sec. Let's be clear on what we are asking for. And I didn't make a motion.
That's true.
I was just suggesting that that's what so I thought the board would agree and then we'd make a motion, but is it realistic to get a recommendation from our legal counsel that they think that this is a good Metro District service agreement and it's all, in line with the concerns we expressed at all our numerous discussions?
Well, I think I'd ask Charles. I don't want to answer on
Okay.
his behalf.
Attorney Norton, were you able to hear that?
Mr. Norton has been involved with both the review and the development of the language of the service plan and the
Yeah,
associated.
this is Attorney Smith, and I had difficulty hearing it.
Great.
So if you could please repeat.
Oh,
what
I'm sorry.
recommendation you'd be looking for from Attorney Norton.
So trustee Hyman is looking for essentially a staff recommendation type thing like we do with other development public hearings, but one regarding this service plan. Is that possible by the 8th, or is that possible at all?
Well, I think that we can certainly, we provided the criteria on which you make the recommendation. I certainly think that we could provide some guidance on whether or not, those findings have been met. I think ultimately, I would hesitate to make a recommendation because I think the findings are really within the discretion of the board. But we can, as I say, certainly provide some guidance on some of the specific criteria as we work through those. And I think that would be a very helpful way to move through your decision making, is to take those criteria and move through those with your questions and some guidance offered. So I think that is what we would be able to provide.
So Attorney Smith?
Yes, sir.
This is trustee Hyman. So when we get land use staff memos, it lists the criteria and it says, staff recommends approval, usually it's pretty rare staff recommends disapproval because if that's the case, it doesn't come to us. But anyway, but staff actually says, these findings, based on this information, these criteria, the findings have been met and staff recommends approval. And if the board disagrees or finds other evidence, then we could disapprove it. But, the memo that we got just says that we may approve, disapprove, or approve with additional information, which we know. But given the complexity of this agreement, I think I'd like staff to tell us, yes, this is a good agreement. It's got safeguards built into it, as we discussed tonight on some of these, potential abuses that were highlighted in the Denver Post articles last year. And I would like some expert guidance that, yeah, this is a good agreement and it's not going to be open to abuses in the future.
Yes, and that's a very specific request, and I think we absolutely can provide you with that. I believe that we would be getting it to you, and we could do that by the 8th. It may not be, maybe difficult to get it Thursday before the 8th, but we will work very hard to do that.
Okay. Great.
I have one additional question based on our development reviews, master plans, that sort of thing. And staff always they do give us that list planning saying that it meets this, it doesn't meet that. And we do sometimes do approval with conditions. But a service plan is a service plan, and it's presented to us as is, and we have to take it as a whole. Either we take it or we reject it, or can you approve it with conditions?
You can approve it with conditions.
Oh, okay.
And I think, the terms of the IGA also have a significant impact on how that district operates in the future, right? I mean, as one simple example, the IGA between the town of Berthoud and Turian Metro Districts, one of those provisions in that IGA is that they can only perform mosquito control consistent with the town's policy, right? That was something very specific that you guys had asked for that we included in that IGA. And so, there can be limitations or conditions placed on what that Metro District can do in the future. Depending on what they are, they may be appropriate to go in the IGA as an example. From my perspective, and certainly you're welcome to ask, and I would encourage you to ask for Mr. Norton or Attorney Smith's recommendation. The list of criteria outlined in the memo from Turian that is included in your packet, they address those statutory criteria and their reasoning for why those statutory criteria are met. From my perspective as the town administrator and our staff, we agree with their reasoning. I think that may be a different question a little bit than what Trustee Hyman is asking, which is, are there some legal protections involved in this agreement that address some of the concerns that you expressed both in the past and tonight? That's a different question, I think, for Mr. Norton. But from a staff perspective, we agree with the reasoning provided for that meet the statutory criteria. Again, as the town administrator and as our internal staff at town hall.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarification, Chris, because I also understood Trustee's question to be more zeroed in on those concerns that were raised in the editorials in the paper, and whether or not what's been presented as adequate safeguards, guardrails, if you will, copy my line, to address those concerns as we, Mr. Norton, understand those concerns. And, I think in his presentation, he outlined how those concerns were described in those editorials, in some ways more accurate descriptions than in some of the editorials, maybe not so accurate. But yes, I do see that. I thank you for that clarification, because I do see Trustee Hyman's question as being
the other one would be an agreement on the wastewater treatment plant, the original.
Well, it sounds like. So, yeah, so my concern on that was just that we have some assurance that this development's gonna be paying its own way for all of the added infrastructure. If the plant, anyway, so I don't know that you can figure out exactly what the breakdown is. I would just like to see something that addresses or, staff assures us that it's not going, that the development's gonna be paying its own way as far as added water and wastewater capacity in addition to the pipes. And I realize, I don't think we can put it 80%, right? So they should only pay their proportional share. And if the plant has to be oversized because of state or EPA regulations, they shouldn't have to pay for that. That should be some other development paying for that. So it might even be possible the town has to front some of the money and pay back later, which, like I said, I want citizens to understand that they are not going to be subsidizing this development. And then, I understood I had a concern about the Mead versus Berthoud no levy difference, but I understand now why that is, and your explanation that our majority of commercial will more than compensate for that. So we believe so. So
Other writers or things you guys wanted to add on this motion?
I have, well, not really a motion, but I have something to add to that. I understand why we don't want the citizens of Inner Berthoud to pay for that, but we're gonna reap the benefits from the added tax revenues from out there. So why wouldn't we want to subsidize some of that, or again, if we want to call it Inner Berthoud, we're gonna reap some of the benefit. So why not? Why would we completely tell them that they have to to pay for themselves when we're gonna reap, the whole town's gonna reap benefit from that whole subdivision?
So the water and the wastewater funds are enterprise funds, right? So those are standalone utilities. So that's what I'm specifically talking about. I'm not talking about public safety. I'm not talking about street maintenance. I'm not talking about
Okay,
all of that kind of stuff, which we will need that added revenue. That's what Mead is theoretically taking part of the property tax for, and we're gonna make up for it in sales tax instead of property tax. And it's funny, but for anybody that wonders why property tax doesn't cover the cost of services. So we heard tonight that metro districts struggle at 15 mils to do operations and maintenance. The towns is what, 9? So every property we have to service based on property tax alone is a losing proposition. The only way you can fund a community in Colorado is with sales tax because of our, our, in my opinion, dysfunctional tax laws.
well, I wasn't talking about property tax, I was talking about sales tax, but
Let me,
but I do understand.
and I hate to be a booger here, but it's a public hearing, and I don't know if we're extending this or getting back into deliberation here. But what else do we want added to that, or is that good? Okay. Trustee Hyman, would you like to make that motion?
Sure, I move to continue the public hearing for the second amended and restated consolidated service plan for the Turian Metropolitan Districts numbers 1 through 6, formerly known as the SMPG Metropolitan Districts 1 through 6, and Turian Metropolitan Districts 7 through 21 until February 8th, with the added information that we provided to the board as discussed prior to the meeting.
All right, trustee Hyman has moved, trustee Stevens has seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Hyman?
Yes.
Mayor Parsbeck?
Yes. All right.
And just to remind everybody, so I had asked Chris earlier if it was quasi judicial, which it is. So we've continued the portion for public input, so we can't discuss the substance of this or come to any decisions prior to the next public hearing.
All right.
I really just wanted to see you guys again.
It's so lonely down here.
So I guess we can still do the number 4 here.
Yes, there should be a second motion to continue the consideration of the IGA, or table the consideration of the IGA to the February 8th.
All right.
Okay. So that wouldn't be continue though, would it, Aaron? That would
Maybe
just,
table,
yeah.
table it.
So I move to table consideration of the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Berthoud and Turian Metropolitan District numbers 1 through 21 until February 8th.
I'll second.
Trustee Hyman has moved, Mayor Pro Tem Dower is seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Hyman?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy? Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Yes.
Mayor Parsbeck?
Yes, all right, that's proven unanimously too. Thank you all for showing up. I know it's a long drive. Move right on to reports here. Start off with Administrator Kirk.
Nothing for me tonight, Mayor, but I'm happy to answer your questions.
I noticed, if you might, we need Josh, but on the north end of 4th Street, southeast 4th Street, which is like Mary's Farm, so Borden Farmstead and Mary's Farm. Yeah, there's no tree lawns on the farmstead. Sorry, there's no trees on the tree lawn on the farmstead side. There's a couple, but I didn't, and the houses look complete, so I don't know. Is that up to Will?
No, it's general, well, I'd have to go back and confirm. But we do allow the delay of planting of trees until spring. Josh doesn't want trees planted in the middle of winter when, even if the homes are complete.
There's a couple there, but that might have been from last year.
So we do have some provisions where we allow the developer to postpone the planting of some landscaping until the season is suitable.
Makes sense.
So that might be what you're seeing, but I honestly don't know the answer. That'd be my guess though.
I mean, I've asked that question before, and it's funny that.
Sorry.
And I got the same answer, but there are some trees in their front yards, but not in the tree lawns.
Yes.
So it was confusing to me, but that's,
And that's because we don't control what gets planted in somebody's front yard, but the tree lawn and public right of way, we have some input on.
Josh might.
oh, I see, okay, all right then.
Yeah, so I mean, if a builder or a homeowner wants to plant whatever they want to plant in their front yard in the middle of winter, they take the risk that it dies. But in the tree lawn, we're a little more particular because we have control over that right of way.
All right, so there's anything else for staff? Attorney Smith?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Trustee Hyman? No report. Trustee Hardy?
I want to thank everybody for coming down to Berthoud's Main Street Snow Fest. I think we had another really great year. We, finally had snow. And in fact, we had more snow than we needed. And so I think a lot of the restaurants, from what you reported as well, Bill and I talked to many of the local businesses, and they said they saw definitely an increase in business traffic, and we're very appreciative of everybody coming down to visit and take a look. So appreciative as well.
Great job, Tim.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And yeah, you must have had a crystal ball on the weather because that was a good postponement.
Trustee Grace?
No major reports, just had a good time at the staff in a year
party.
Yeah, I bowled 200, which everybody else who says otherwise is a liar. It was a good time. And yeah, it was good.
Maybe if you'd have bowled 5 games.
No.
But yeah, that was it.
Awesome. Trustee Stevens?
On that, you're the liar, okay. Just real quick, just thumbing through there and seeing all the projects and all the things that are being done. Just kudos to the staff and everything. Very,
Yeah.
very nice job.
Yeah.
Oil and gas reverse setbacks. I know we don't want to talk about that because that's land use rather than the service, yeah, thank you, service plan. But if in the next month or so, we change our reverse setbacks, and we touched on that a little bit, how is it, are they gonna have any grounds to fall back on whatever the original PUD? Or is that something, since it's a public safety thing, that they have to adhere to new rules?
I'm gonna have to,
I think that's a little more than a report.
yeah,
That's a
I'm gonna
request.
have to make a fairly significant, yeah, we'll have to look at it from a legal perspective. I've been rereading their overall development plan approval. Yeah, the 217 pages. I admittedly have not read it in like 3 years, but in light of expecting them to start submitting again. And there are some provisions in there that give them some preemption over our changing development code, knowing that that was a 30-year build out. And there's some sense to that, right? When you start a project of that magnitude, and you know it's going to take you 30 years. They got the town to agree that there were certain things that that we couldn't override in their ODP. I don't think that was one of them, but I have to look, and then I have to make sure that that's legal. But our current setback from oil and gas wells, we already have a reverse setback on our code, it's 200 feet. It's more than that if it's like a gathering place, like a school or a church, or, you know, an assembly occupancy, which is different than a single family house. But if we increase our reverse setback beyond that, I don't know how that will impact Turian yet. I need to confirm.
Next week, we have the oil and gas study session.
Correct.
So
So
it'd be
I'm
good
gonna
to-
try to get an answer for you.
Yeah, and good to have that.
Because the reality is, that's the only property in town that'll be impacted by reverse setbacks.
Currently.
You would need to know that, yeah, it's currently
Yeah.
not.
And also because it involves a change in state law, which prioritizes health and safety over oil and gas development. So.
There are some good reverse setback codes that have been, I don't know if they're good or not. I mean, that's part of the struggle I have, is it's hard for me to comment on whether or not it's a good regulation or not. I can tell you there are regulations that seem to be reasonable. The county is recently, Larimer County has recently adopted reverse setbacks that are kind of graduated based on the age of the well and its current production status and those kinds of things. That aren't that different from what we have, other than like new wells, right? Because the drilling activity and the early production phases have a more significant impact on the environment, I think, is the justification, right? And that once it's been in operation for several years, that those impacts drop dramatically. And so if it's a well that's been in operation for more than 3 years under the county's code, that reverse setback gets much, much smaller. So, I mean, there are some examples like that we could look at that may not have a significant impact on Turian, that might be perfectly reasonable, but anyway, we're gonna bring information about all of that to you, or try to anyway, to the extent that we can, so that you can give us some direction about where to go from there at the study session.
Okay, well, as Mr. Larson was saying, some of those transmission lines and that type of thing, I know there's setbacks to those as well.
That's true.
And that's hopefully will be discussed as well. And bringing that up, I am probably not going to be here next week, which I really wanted, I wanted to get, actually, I want to come to all of them, but that one I really wanted to come to. I know I don't need to explain myself, but they're gonna pour my pad and I need to be down there for that. And, but I apologize. I might try to zoom in, although we see how well that works, so.
It's worked really flawlessly until tonight.
It did work
unfortunately.
really flawlessly until tonight. Just need to get a satellite dish for the top here. Little roving town board member there.
The last time I called in, I was in a windstorm. I mean, it was horrible, but anyway.
For your comfort, Trustee Stevens, we won't be making any decisions at that study session. But hopefully the board will be giving us some direction about kind of what to bring back to discussion.
Well, I get so much more out of attending than reviewing a tape or a recording. I guess I'm living in the past. Let me get the tape recorder out.
It's a reel to reel.
Anyway, that's all I got, so.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing to report beyond what's already been said. Snowfest, great job.
Likewise, Snowfest is great. With the oil and gas, I think it's important to look at existing development out there too. Which you guys obviously will. What else?
my historic preservation plaque has already fallen off, and the gentleman who's installed it,
Should have hired a better installer.
the gentleman who installed it specifically warned me that this is not good enough, but it's the town's policy, so I think we need to look at historic preservation to make these plaques.
So we need to weld them instead of gluing them. And since it was done by a volunteer, you know what they say, you get what you pay for.
Can you rivet them? Well, I mean, if anything would work.
I'm sure there are much better ways to do it than glue, so.
For you.
Well,
We can work that.
mine is probably the only one in town. I haven't seen, I don't know.
Even if there were like pegs on the back, there's lots of different
Yeah,
ways to
thinking
do it,
pegs,
but pretty sure that we can get that fixed for you, Will.
Awesome.
I'll come over and help.
Sure it wasn't stolen?
Yeah, that would be the norm at my house. Let's see, MPO meeting. You want to talk about Zoom issues? Well, mine was a battery issue, but the chair, which is me, totally cut out of the meeting. So the vice chair had to finish the meeting. So I don't think as far as messing up, you could beat that. It was pretty bad, but luckily everyone had a good chuckle out of it. I was at a location where I didn't bring my charger, so. Oh, Lynn. So I can't really make these tree committee meetings just because I can only really take off one day, and I choose tonight versus last night. So I asked Lynn if a brief committee update would be. Do you think you could do a brief tree committee update? Go ahead.
It's not up to us, he's the mayor. He's running the meeting.
Lynn told me not to say this, but I will because he said that. Dr. Larson. People need to know that Lynn is a doctor. That's impressive.
Dr. Larson.
Yeah, he didn't tell anyone
Nice.
Chemistry, not medicine.
that. Still awesome.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna slash my tires, steal my truck.
My voice doesn't quite sound like Mayor Carspec, but I am being Mayor Carspec for this purpose because he said he was gonna bend the rules for this purpose.
I think it's good.
We had the tree committee meeting last night. I'm not the chair, I'm just a volunteer. You get what you pay for. We discussed, the first thing I should say is that we'll put off the February meeting to, where did I put the date down here? The last Monday of the month because of holidays and other things and problems coming up. So the first agenda item for next month will be discussion of information, getting information out to residents about watering. Committee had a long discussion about watering the trees, especially the young trees, and how people aren't getting the message that they're responsible for the tree lawn and watering them. And so we will be discussing how can we get that message out to the citizens. March meeting will be discussing Arbor Day and getting that set up. Let's see, watering the trees, that was a big discussion, as I said, that was probably the main discussion there. Then the one agenda item was Roberts Lake Park Nursery. I was told by one of the trustees that we should look at that a little seriously because of water in the ground issues, boggy issues. What's planned is to use the southern, I'm going to call it the southern section in the center, just to the east of the lake, which is the highest ground in that area. And everything drains from there towards the north and the east is the way the folks who know something about this argued. So they're going to be planning to plant 8x8 grid so they can have a bigger mowing area. They don't need a weed whack between the trees. It's the highest ground, as I said, and they've already contracted to buy the trees. Josh and the town staff. I think he said 100 to 125, but if you look at this chart that he used, 125 trees, and they vary in price, but it's a total of about a little over $9,000 for these 125 trees. And they will be planting them in a fashion that will hopefully keep them from dying and growing and in this higher ground so they won't have that bog issue that was mentioned. And let's see. Someone on the committee asked about the trails into this, and the trails are not supposed to be for motor vehicles other than for the town staff. And there's some discussion about how we keep other people off, because people are gonna try to come in anyway. That's the pith of what the long discussion. We were able to get done in 59 minutes, by the way.
Wow. That's pretty great for that committee. That's awesome. Well, I'll follow on that real quick. Is there a way that we can help get the word out about watering? A newsletter or an email or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Newsletter, Facebook.
I'm sure Josh would bring that up since Lynn did.
I think Josh has brought it up internally, but I honestly can't recall.
No, that's great.
Tree dies, you have to pay to replace it. How about that?
For the new board members, so that existing nursery, they tried new types. The tree committee on each row had different kind of strategies on it's kind of like not a science project in a way that some of them were completely different strategies on how to grow a tree. So it was interesting in that regard, but it was designed for Old Town and places as a shadow planting. So as these old trees die, you plant new trees in the middle of them. So by the time the old ones die, the new ones are halfway going. Because of the new developments that the trees are already failing, our town forester said, these are getting eaten up really rapidly. And I guess the location is boggy down there, so that's why it's getting moved too. But hey, I'm just happy that nurseries get used, fortunately for the wrong reasons, but hopefully we can address that over time. That's it for my reports. Is there anything else? All right, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting. Have a good night.